Radio IMWS.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the first edition of the election special on Radio IMWS. Apologies there for a bit of a stutter. Now then, we're going to get straight into it. We're not going to go on to the announcements because we've got a very, very packed show for you today, inshallah. Okay, now on May the 7th, voters up and down the country will head off to their local polling stations with an eye to vote in a local MP and a government. With just 12 weeks to go before the general election, it's important to make an informed decision and use your vote to shape politics on a local and national level with issues that matter to you. With this in mind, over the coming weeks, Radio IMWS will be giving an opportunity for local candidates to come into the studio and give you, our listeners, a chance to ask the questions that matter to you. So this is really all about you out there. You are the voters. Your vote counts, and it's your opportunity to find out about what really matters to you so you can make an informed decision. Now then, joining me in the studio this week, we do have the Conservative candidate for Batley Spen Imtiaz Ameen. Imtiaz, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
And also with me, we do have co-presenting this evening, we have Ayub. Bismillah. Ayub, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I know I've given a very short introduction to the program, but I believe you want to say add a line to
Just
that?
very briefly, Brother Muhammad. First of all, it's Friday the 6th of February. So if you're listening to this on a Saturday or a Sunday, it will be a repeat performance. But just to sort of mention to our listeners that Radio IMWS election special, and before we start, we want to make it very clear to all our listeners that Radio IMWS will be very much neutral and do not intend to promote any particular candidate or a party. However, we will try our very best to represent our listeners, IMWS members, and the wider community's interests. To this end, we will challenge candidates on what they stand for and how they will benefit the community as a whole. I think that's quite right, isn't it, that we put it to our listeners in the first instance.
Yes.
So it is not going to be biased in any way at all.
No, it's not. But we will be asking critical and important questions. I'm sure Imtiaz, mashallah, will be nervous in his chair right now after saying that. But no, it's important, of course, for people to make an informed decision. You can't make an informed decision until you know until you ask the right questions, really, to be honest with you. Okay, now then, we will be opening up the landline in about 10 minutes' time. We are going to, inshallah, start with Imtiaz telling us a little bit about himself and why he's decided to stand in the Batley Spen constituency. But you can, however, send in your texts or WhatsApps from now, inshallah ta'ala. The number is 07460809218. If you want to send text WhatsApps, you can do, and we will be opening up the landlines, inshallah, in about 10 minutes or so. Right, now the program itself will be running until about 9 p.m. We have got, we might run a little bit over depending on how busy we get, but inshallah ta'ala, but the initial time is 9 p.m. So don't wait too long to get your questions in. Now, Imtiaz, over to you. I'm sure you're nervous by now. But tell us a little bit about yourself and why did you decide to stand for Batley Spen?
I was born in Dewsbury. I've lived in Savile throughout my life. I went to school in Savile, then went to Birkdale High School. I went to university, studied law, and then qualified as a solicitor. So that's my professional background. As far as my politics is concerned, I joined the Conservative Party, I think, around 2000. And I stood for election as a councillor in Dewsbury in 2003, in which I was successful. Mm-hmm. In 2005, I fought a general election against Jack Straw in Blackburn, who was then the Foreign Secretary. And in 2007, I stood down as a councillor due to work commitments and other matters. In terms of standing in Batley Spen, I wanted to stand in a seat which was local to me. Obviously, in Dewsbury, we have a Conservative Member of Parliament, and the next seat, which is local to me, as in very local, is Batley Spen. I know the area, I've lived here, I went to school with people who live in Batley Spen. I've played football, socialised, gone to weddings. It's part of the wider community as far as I'm concerned. So it's representing a local area for me.
Right.
It's not somewhere where I'm having to travel or I'm going to have to move. If I win, there's no disturbance to my family life, and I carry on as normal and represent an area which I, in effect, grew up in.
Yeah.
And there's nothing greater than representing an area where you've lived in all your life.
Just for the benefit of our listeners, Imtiaz, tell us a little bit about your family background and your origins.
Yeah. My father came over from India in 1963. He obviously, like many others who came around that time, worked in the mills, in the factories. He went back, I think, 5 years later, got married. My parents came over in 1968 again, settled in Dewsbury, and lived there. And we've lived there ever since. So that's my background in terms of where my parents came from. I'm of Indian origin. Slightly, the vast majority of Indians in Batley are from the Surat district.
Yeah.
We are from the Bharuch district.
Right. So you're Gujarati then,
though my wife is from Surat, she's actually from the city of Surat. So I have, you can call me your Jamaya in that sense. So that's a sort of the ethnic background side to it. I was born here, so obviously I have been to India many times, but my roots are here.
Right. Okay. Now then, right. You've chosen to study to contest for the Batley Spen seat. What do you think are the big issues for the people and communities in the constituency you're running for?
Although we talk about the constituency, it is slightly varied in the sense that if you start from we are here, Batley, and it goes all the way up to East Byley. East Byley is a village. Some of the areas are very tight-knit, back-to-back houses. So there's slightly different solutions to different problems. But the most important element of this campaign is going to be, who do you trust to continue with the economic recovery? And although that's a national question in terms of the policies, specifically for Batley and Spen, we need to try and regenerate the area, in particular towns like Batley, like Heckman-Wyke, in terms of ensuring that there's occupancy in the shops. So if you compare Birstall, Birstall has almost 100% occupancy in the town centre. Yeah. And then you come to Batley and you come into Heckman-Wyke, and there seems to be quite a different picture.
Okay.
We need to look at carefully what we need to do to try and regenerate those areas. You will have seen in the last few days the Prime Minister and George Osborne were in Leeds yesterday and made several announcements in terms of providing funding for these areas. West Yorkshire has been targeted for finance and tech development. And if I was to win and become an MP, the first thing we try and do is try and draw some of that funding which exists in the West Yorkshire Combined Authority in the Leeds City region, to try and pull some of that funding into our area. The last significant amount of money that came into Batley and Spen was in, I think, the late 90s with the City Challenge, when Mrs. Elizabeth Peacock brought in 40 million. So I think that's the main priority, is to draw in funding for the area to develop that. Yeah. The second big challenge we face is our hospital. We are in a situation where we seem to be losing plenty of services due to the merger we had with Pinderfields, and now we're part of the Mid Yorkshire Trust. We seem to be losing a lot more services on a drip by drip basis, and unless we sort that out, we're going to end up with a hospital in name only. So I think that's something else we need to campaign for and we need to fight for. Yeah. Thirdly, I think that's close to my heart is the development of sporting activities for younger people. I think it's very important. That combines, if you can combine that with health, that in a time where we are seeing a lot more children who are obese, they're not participating in sporting activities as perhaps we were when we were younger. I mean, due to the availability of tablets, computers and games and the Xbox, etc. And I think we need to get children out playing more. Yeah. Helps their social skills. And more importantly, we're living in a period where younger people are very susceptible to messages from unsavoury people as far as radicalisation is concerned, and that sort of thing. And the more they socialise and meet people and do so in an environment which is safe, the less chances of that happening. So I think those are three priorities which I would say for Batley Spen.
Okay, just before you start, Ayuba, we did say 10 minutes, so the lines are open now. So if you do want to give the studio a call, it's 01924 505 629. Remember, you can send a text or WhatsApp on 07460 809218. Ayuba, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, just go back to your first point about regenerating and regeneration in the Batley area. And you've made the point about a lot of shops that are closed and not occupied. Then you talked about possibility of bringing some funding in, through central government.
Yeah.
How is that funding going to open the doors of these closed shops?
Well, it's attracting businesses. If you bring in a pot of money and you're saying, right, here we have X amount of money for businesses who want to get involved and regenerate the area, that's how the local businesses could align themselves with that development. I mean, there is also, for example, if the government is funding training for younger people, we need a training provider. The provider we'd hope for would be come from the local area, who would provide the expertise in a particular field, but he's supported by the funding.
Because the feeling in the town is, because we've got a big supermarket in the middle, it's taking away all the businesses from the small shops.
Yeah. Can I just add to that? Imtiaz, you've mentioned about bringing in and opening up the shops to local businesses, but one of the problems we've got is that we have half of Commercial Street, which is owned by Tesco's. And there is a very, very, or rather consensus of opinion, and it is one that is supported with certain details as well, is that Tesco do not want shops to be opened up there to take away to take away their shoppers. So although you can bring the money in, how are you going to convince someone like a giant like Tesco's to allow shops who are going to then have an impact on their profit margin to come into the town?
You've also got to consider, would a shop want to open which competes with Tesco? So you're looking at a different field. So selling products which Tesco do not sell. The other argument, I know Ayuba, you just mentioned that Tesco is pulling the customers away from the town centre. You could equally argue that Tesco is bringing in people into the town centre because of the number of people that come to Tesco. So if you have that footfall and you then have selling something that's different to what Tesco is selling, you have that spillover.
It's not happening, is it, though? Tesco has been open for a long time, and the shops keep closing each day.
Well, this is one of the arguments, because people who come shopping to Tesco's come to the Tesco car park. And this is one of the arguments that was there right at the start when Tesco was being built, for an entrance, for the back of for one side of Tesco's to actually be adjacent to Commercial Street. It's away from Commercial Street. You do get a lot of shoppers into Batley. They do come to Tesco's, they do come to the mill. There are shops in the town centre. They're not getting the footfall, and as a result, they're having to close after a while.
I mean, that's a market argument, that is somebody selling a product which a customer wants to buy. Now, if Tesco is, like as you say, a big player, it's going to be difficult to compete. So therefore, what we're trying to attract is those businesses that can sell something that's not being sold in Tesco. Or a different, for argument's sake, you can say, okay, we're going to try to develop this into a place where there's going to be restaurants, upmarket restaurants, for argument's sake. So you're looking at that. So everybody within this area would try and say, if we're going out for a meal in the evenings, let's go to Commercial Street. So it's just that sort of thinking. I mean, I'm not saying I have all the answers, but there needs to be some different type of thinking, because at the moment, things are moving in one direction, and it's not the direction we want to be moving in. So you could develop, for example... This is
a problem, isn't it? I think people are saying, if you haven't got restaurants and takeaways, there's nothing that's going to work in Batley.
Well, it's an argument that's been put forward. I mean, you need to have something that's there which is going to attract people. Now, you can say we're going to have expensive restaurants, a combination of expensive and not so expensive restaurants, or we might say, right, we're going to... perhaps like a phone market, we've got a few phone shops. It's something that needs to be thought through, sat down with people who are local and those central government planners. What can they offer us in terms of financial support to develop this area? I mean, look, we've got a successful business park in Birstall. Now, it's come about as a result of some sort of investment, some sort of thinking, and that critical thinking needs to be done in Batley Town Centre, and whether we like it, whether we don't like it, Tesco's there.
The
And we're going to have to
in
work with
Batley are
that.
worried.
Yeah.
They're really frightened because not long ago there was a talk about another major supermarket
Yes.
being built, not very far away from Tesco. And just imagine the impact that might have.
Well, you've got 2 or 3, and is it Iceland and Asda?
Asda down there as well.
They are there, and this is my point.
But they're smaller. The one that he was referring to would have been a full-size supermarket, a hypermarket even. I agree with you with the innovative thinking, but as so far, is there an answer? That's the question, because I appreciate the whole issue of restaurants and takeaways, but then you're not turning the town into...
The restaurants and takeaways is just an example.
Yeah.
I mean, you could think, West Yorkshire has been marked down as a finance and tech area of development. It's something we need to look at what the government has to offer.
Yeah.
What are they saying when they say, well, we want finance and tech to be developed in the West Yorkshire region? What is it that they're actually referring to? And if they've got money for that development, okay, we can sit down with them and say, okay, let's have a look at what you're prepared to offer.
Right.
But it's not. There's no easy answer. I mean, if there was, obviously it'd be a full town. But I'm just the contrast I was making was with Birstall. That Birstall
does have a full occupancy.
Has a full occupancy, and,
as does Murfield.
And Murfield, Cleckheaton's not bad. So what is it that they're doing?
What's lacking in Batley?
And what's lacking in Batley?
So just to come back to that point you were making about what guarantee is there of central government funding for Batley?
Yeah, and can I just add to that, please? Because the first question is about the guarantee of central government funding, but the other side of it is central government have made a massive cut in local councils. I mean, the Kirklees Council is looking by 2017 to save £129 million.
Yeah, it's just 2 separate issues. If we deal with the actual central government funding, yesterday we had, as I mentioned before, the Prime Minister came to Leeds. There's going to be £6.5 billion of infrastructure development that's going to come into our area.
Yeah.
On top of that, there's other money that's been assigned to specific areas in terms of development of certain sectors. As I mentioned, we've got finance and tech. Other areas have got science, and and we had, I think, last week we had Kirklees College and Huddersfield University receiving a fairly large grant from central government. In terms of what guarantees that we're going to get it, well, if it's a Conservative government and I'm elected, I mean that's that's going to be hopefully your guarantee that if you will bring that in. I mean, I can't there's no absolute cast iron guarantee I can give you because it depends who's in power. But it's something that's absolutely top of my priority list. As far as the local government funding is concerned, the reason it's been cut is because we had a huge deficit, 150 billion when we came into power, that had to be reduced. There's no alternative than to start making efficiency savings, and the council has to bear its fair share of efficiencies that it has to find. In an ideal world, there'd be no cuts anywhere. But if you want to get the deficit down, which we have done, if you want to get the economy recovering, which we have done, we've got the fastest growth of all G7 countries. We've got 1.75 million more people in work. Inflation is at an all-time low. Fuel prices are dropping. So the economy is moving in the right direction. There's lots more to do, but it depends. If we can get a majority government in 2015, we'll get those jobs done.
Okay.
Sorry, yes, I just wanted to touch on another issue that you mentioned which was about Dewsbury Hospital, about saving the services at Dewsbury Hospital, which, of course, a lot of people locally support. Now, financially, whether that's viable or not is, of course, a separate issue, and what can be saved or can't be saved. However, a scrutiny panel of councillors did actually refer the matter to the Health Secretary, and they did say that there were concerns, or they did raise concerns. Now, the Health Secretary then allowed Mid Yorkshire, or gave Mid Yorkshire the go-ahead on these proposals being implemented. So your party, essentially, has given them the go-ahead. So how can you change back on that?
Well, that's a central decision. You in terms of the actual decision to change the services, it was a proposal put forward by clinicians. That was the argument that was put forward, that this is a clinician-based decision. It's not a financial decision. It's the argument was that for specialist services, if we're in one area and the operations are done repeatedly, the expertise is there. That was the argument that was put forward. And I think that's the decision that's been approved. We as local people don't accept that. So central government may have said that they accept those decisions by the clinicians. We don't. What we're saying is, at the very least, have an independent review of that decision.
Yeah.
How is that going to impact the people in North Kirklees, Dewsbury and Batley? Because bearing in mind, we were, in 2004, I think it was, combined with Pinderfields as a Mid Yorkshire Trust.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes no sense whatsoever. We are part of Kirklees. Kirklees has its own health and social policy. Yet when it comes to treatment, we then end up with Wakefield. So the joint thinking was incorrect. So that's the first mistake that was made. The second one was that once you have a new hospital built, it was built with private finance initiatives. It's inevitable that the new hospital is going to be utilised a lot more than the old hospital. So when you had the new ones built in Pontefract and Pinderfields, that the consequence of what's happening now is as a result of those new hospitals being built. So I think our argument now is we want an independent review of these decisions and perhaps a wider review of what services are going to be provided in Dewsbury long term, because what we don't want is a service provided which is inadequate. We want a service provided that's of a higher quality.
Apologies, but just to interrupt you on that one. I appreciate the historical side of things. I appreciate that. And during the consultations, the reason why the scrutiny panel referred the matter to the Health Secretary was on the basis that there were a lot of information that continuously changed, and they felt the public were not, and the councillors themselves were not given information in due time. They were not given reports with sufficient time to actually scrutinise before panel meetings, and a number of different issues. But the Health Secretary gave it the rubber stamp.
Yeah, well, he may have done, but I don't agree with that. I mean, what I'm saying is,
would you raise the issue to bring back some of the services?
Well, what we're saying is, let's have an independent review of this decision. We don't want anything to move at the moment. Let's have a review. If that review comes back, for argument's sake, saying, okay, these services are inadequate in Dewsbury, we don't want to be treated within a service which is inadequate. What we're saying is we want those services to be retained in Dewsbury, such as accident and emergency, with consultant-led, which you can't expect, for argument's sake, a 4-year-old who's hurt himself to be trekked, on a 35-minute journey to Pinderfields, even if longer. We'd much rather than a 5-minute trip to Dewsbury Hospital Accident Emergency Department there. So what I'm saying is, if elected in May, the first thing is we'll have a meeting with the Department of Health saying, look, we are not happy with what's been decided. We want a review of this decision.
Okay, you've made your point very clearly and very passionately, and you've made a good, strong case for your views. And my question would be, what have you done about it so far? Forget being elected. Like, you're a prospective candidate for the Conservative Party. You're a resident of Dewsbury.
Yeah.
If you're so passionate about it, what have you done about it so far?
As part of the Conservative group, we've made representations already. That's gone to the Department of Health. I know that Robert Light, who's our Conservative group leader in Kirklees, he's made representations about it. So representations have been made that this is what our view is, and this is what we feel, that we want an independent review. If you go back around the time that I was selected in August, just before that or just after that, there was a press release, if you remember, which said that the Conservative group is asking for an independent review of the hospital. So that's been made. Those representations have been made.
Have you been part of any joint campaigns or local campaigns?
Not personally. Not with any group. I haven't. I mean, the only involvement has been with the Conservative group, not as part of any independent. I know there were a couple of meetings that were held by one of the unions, or I can't remember if it was a union-led meeting, but
there was a few groups that were formed.
There was a few groups that were formed, yes. But our representations have gone from the Conservative group.
What's the Conservative group saying?
It's basically the same position, that we're not happy with the decision that's been taken, and we want a review, because from here for us it's 30 minutes to Pinderfields. If you go further on towards Birstall, the journey to Pinderfields is a lot longer. So they're a lot more concerned in terms of the distance that they have to travel. So it's either Bradford that side or Pinderfields this side.
Yeah. Well, okay, we do need to go into a break. I just want to make one point on the hospital, which I did make to the CCG when I interviewed them as well. That was for the publication, which is, of course, if the people on the verge start going to the other hospitals, that reduces the amount of patients going to Dewsbury, and ultimately the fear that people have of services being closed in Dewsbury is a very real fear. Anyway, we are going to go into a break. We will be back with you in just a minute and a half, inshallah. But if you do want to get into the conversation today, this is election special on Radio IMWS, and in the studio we have the Conservative candidate for Batley and Spen Imtiaz Ameen. You want to ask a question? Feel free, inshallah ta'ala. You can text or WhatsApp 07460809218, or you can give us a call on 01924 505 629. We just take a break. We'll be right back with you after this.
Online and on your home receiver, you're listening to Radio IMWS. Join the women-only over-50s elderly lunch club every Monday from 12 p.m. till 3 p.m. at the Al Hikmah Center. Enjoy a meal in the company of friends as well as gentle exercise routines, including the use of treadmills and exercise bikes. That's the over-50s elderly lunch club every Monday from 12 p.m. till 3 p.m. at the Al Hikmah Center on 28 Track Road, Batley, WF177AA. For more information, call 01924 500 555. Reach your customers through our radio, magazines and website with competitive rates. Advertising on Radio IMWS, Pegam, Unnisa and the IMWS website could give your business the boost it deserves. For more details, email info@imws.org.uk or call 01924 500 555. It is related by Sayyidina Anas radiallahu anhu that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, when a man marries, he has completed half of his religion, so let him fear Allah regarding the remaining half. The Al Hikmah Nikah service launched by the IMWS aims to introduce prospective marriage partners to help fulfill this important aspect of faith. The service is open to unmarried Muslims who are permanent residents of the UK. For more information, visit our website at www.imws.org.uk. Radio IMWS.
Welcome back to Radio IMWS. This is the election special with me, Brother Muhammad, and my co-host Ayub Bismillah. And today's guest is the Conservative candidate for Batley and Spen, Imtiaz Ameen. Now then, just before the break, Imtiaz, we were talking about Dewsbury Hospital. We have got a WhatsApp that's come in. Says Simon Revel has supported the downgrading of A&E. His neighbouring fellow Conservative MP does not hold the same view. And there's a link actually to the Examiner. I mean, that's a fair point. You're, a member of your party who is an MP who could have stood up and could have done a lot more, people feel, didn't. So why should people think that you would? Rather.
I disagree with the position that Simon's taken on this, so there's not much more I can say on that.
Right. Oh, that's absolutely fine. We've got another, and I think this will take us into another important issue, so I think it might be worth going in. But
I just want to tackle the other point you made about looking at improving sporting and cultural facilities.
Yes.
And then, I mean, how do you aim to go about that? Because it's a minefield, isn't it?
Well, I'm a chairman of a football club in Savile Town. We cater for children from the ages of 7 right through to 18. And one of the things that in the last couple of years we're trying to develop is send our volunteers onto coaching courses. And the long-term plan is to have a clubhouse. Because once you have a clubhouse, it's a central focal point where lots more activity can be developed. And if you look at any club that has a clubhouse, it's not just, for example, football or cricket or rugby. There's lots of other activities that spill over. So you could have a room, for example, in the winter, table tennis, this sort of badminton, etc. Like you've got here with the hall. So there is that focal point. And I think once you get a clubhouse, that's what feeds into other activities. And that's the point I'm trying to make, that if you can get something like this, funding from something like this, then it will make a big difference.
Okay, we'll come back to that point. And again, I think there's a lot more involved with that in terms of schools and what schools can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, your views and your opinions and your aims and objectives for developing schools and so on. But you want to take that?
Yes, I'd like to take this because we will be going on to another a passionate issue. Now then, this is from Brother Haroon, who's asking, my voting decision in the general election in May 2015 will depend on the candidate's position on Palestine. I will be more likely to vote for a candidate to become an MP who calls for an end of the siege of Gaza, calls for the protection of Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem against extremist Israeli settler attacks, and thirdly, calls for the immediate and unconditional end to the occupation. Now, Imtiaz, we'll take them one at a time. This is obviously about Gaza and Palestine, which is a very important issue locally to a lot of people, as we saw with the protests that happened last summer as well, and across the communities as well. Okay, first of all, calls for an end of the siege of Gaza. Would you call for an end of the siege of Gaza?
Absolutely, yes. Why is there a siege? I mean, these people are basically boxed into what you can at best describe as an open prison. They are not getting sufficient humanitarian support. They're not getting sufficient support to rebuild the devastated towns and cities. And it's really unacceptable for whether it's the Israeli crossing, whether it's the Egyptian crossing. They should be opened up unconditionally. There's no excuse for not opening those up.
Mm.
That's a different view from what your party holds, isn't it?
No.
Well, ending the siege.
Yeah.
No, the party doesn't say that there should be a siege. Where have you got that from?
Has the party taken any actions? Okay, let's just go through the second question then, because obviously the listener has taken time. So, calls for the protection of Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem against extremist Israeli settler attacks. And we might as well take the third one. Calls for the immediate and unconditional end of the occupation, which is essentially both hand and glove, really, to be honest with you. So, calls for the protection of Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem against extremist Israeli settler attacks, and calls for the immediate unconditional end to occupation.
Well, the settlements in themselves are illegal.
Yeah.
They're accepted as illegal settlements by the international community. I think it's Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention says that the occupying power cannot transport people from its population into an occupied land, which is what Israel has been doing. So the settlements are absolutely illegal.
Yeah.
And it's almost, the second question, that if settlers are committing criminal acts, it's wrong on two counts. One, the fact that they're settlers, and two, the fact that it's a criminal act. So the sanctity of the Al-Aqsa Mosque has to be protected. I mean, for every Muslim, that's there's no compromise on that.
Okay. Now picking up on what Ayub mentioned, because we did see in the summer where I believe it was an Israeli who got killed, and David Cameron came out very strong, and then subsequently we saw we saw the murder of over 2,000 Palestinians, and the wounding of over 10,000, and the destruction which comes to millions.
And that included 500 children.
Yes.
Mm.
Now, during that time, David Cameron, sadly, didn't come out, didn't stand at a podium, and didn't condemn what Israel was doing. To such a point, the Baroness Varsi ultimately felt no other option except to resign from her post.
Yes.
Now, that's a very strong statement against your leader.
Well, in terms of the Palestine, the whole Palestine situation, I've made myself, in the previous answer, very clear. Settlements are illegal. Palestine has to be recognized as an independent state. The two-state solution is something that's been accepted for now 30 years. I think if you go back to the Madrid conference, you had the Oslo Accords, the Annapolis conference, the Taba summit, the Y summit. You've had about 7-8 summits during that period. And all those summits have said the same thing, that the Palestinians should have an independent state.
Yeah.
Why hasn't it happened? It's because any UN vote that takes place or any UN discussion that takes place is always vetoed by America.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. Whether we in this country, whether France, whether Russia, whatever angle they vote from, the only way Palestine will be recognized is if the Americans decide to support it in the United Nations. And at the moment, they're showing no willingness to change. And this is why the two-state solution, although we always say we want the two-state solution, it's in an extremely perilous condition that we don't seem to be edging anywhere near the two-state solution. If you just go now into the last sort of 18 months with the John Kerry initiative, I mean, he's been shuttling to and from. He's met Netanyahu something like 32 times. He's met the Palestinians. And where are we? We're almost where we were at the beginning.
Yeah.
So we are in a position where it's not. I'm not going to say it's helplessness.
Yeah.
The intention's right, but there's no actual activity.
Okay,
And I find it a bit sort of disingenuous from people to say, oh, it's a Labour position or it's a Conservative position. If you go to 2006, when there was a Gaza incident very similar to this, I think a smaller scale, but it's very similar. And if you remember, Tony Blair didn't condemn the Israeli actions. And subsequently, when he resigned, there was one argument that it was as a result of that pressure was put on. Gordon Brown came in. 2008, we had the last major Gaza war. Similar amount, I think 2,000 people were killed then. Similar sort of condemnation towards the government saying they're not doing enough. Yet the same people who are now saying don't vote Conservative voted for Labour in 2010. So if your reason for voting on Gaza is that we're not going to vote for Conservatives because of the position that David Cameron took, fine, I'll accept that. Only if you then say that you didn't vote for Labour in 2010. You can't have your cake and eat it.
But
you can't say,
do you agree?
If you just let me finish, you can't say that we're going to support Labour blindly. I'm going to vote for reasons of Gaza, but I'm going to support Labour blindly. But when the Conservatives take a decision, you have to understand both parties, since 1967, know that the occupation is illegal. The position of both parties, both governments, has been pre-1967 borders, to go back to those borders and to have a Palestinian state based on those borders. Now, we have had how many governments since then?
Yeah.
So yeah. I find it a bit sort of. I mean, what I'm saying is that if you're going to vote on Gaza, then you shouldn't have voted Labour in 2010 if your reason for voting is based solely on Gaza.
Yeah.
You can't just say I'm going to vote on Gaza, but only when the Conservatives are in power. I'm not going to vote for them.
Okay, I think fair point, and I think we accept that. But would you agree? Forget Labour Party and what they've done and what they might do and what they might not do. Would you agree that the Tories aren't doing enough?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think the Tories can be more vocal. I mean, if you go back about, I think it was October, Sir Alan Duncan, who was the former International Development Secretary, he did a speech where his actual words were that this is theft. This is what he said. And he said that in the way we have racism, homophobia, and other such categorizations of prejudice, anybody who supports settlements should be regarded in that context. It was extremely strong language that he used. The unfortunate thing is that when a Conservative like Sir Alan Duncan makes these comments, there is very little support from the Muslim community. There's very few people who have contacted him saying, look, we agree with you, and we support what you have said, and we unreservedly agree that this is illegal activity. And this is one of the problems that we're facing. Yes, if I just make one general point, and I've discussed this with other people before, when there's a Gaza war, we Muslims, we're out on the streets, we bang the drums, we go on the marches, we spend a huge amount of money. And then as time goes by, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months later, we all saw the videos of Tesco. Well, look at the boycott, as soon as the sales happened, everyone was there.
Yeah.
Other lobbying groups, and we always say, the Jewish lobbying group is very powerful. A lobbying group's job is to lobby. The Israeli lobby... The Israeli lobby is hard. It does what it's supposed to do. It does what it says on the tin. It lobbies. We don't lobby. We make a lot of noise. We go on marches. We shout. We don't lobby. We spend a lot more money. 200,000 people go to London. Just imagine how much money that is. The Israeli lobby takes members of parliament to Israel, shows them what's going on. We talk about it. We don't do enough action.
That's a good point, and a point taken. I mean, would you agree that the mass murder that took place in Israel not so long ago, comes to a war crime basically, and that do you agree that Israel should be taken to task on this?
Absolutely. I mean, we hear that Israel targets very precisely. But Gaza is so densely populated that any targeting is leading to severe casualties amongst civilians. And I think that's the problem.
Can I? Because the message, we've got a couple of messages come in. The first one is, what is Imtiaz going to do about Palestine? How is he going to raise the issue within his party and government? And the second one, bear with me a moment, is... what is he going to do to support the pro-Palestinian lobby? So there's two questions in there. What are you going to do if you come in as the MP for Batley Spen? What are you going to do to raise the issue of Palestine with your party and with the government? And the second question, what are you going to do to support the pro-Palestinian lobby?
Well, the arguments I'm making today are the same arguments I'll be making to my party. There is a movement within the party. There is a softening up, most definitely, within the party in terms of favoritism towards a Palestinian state, in terms of moving in that direction. Because nobody can be... We were in Ramzan, we were sat down to have iftar, and you see those pictures later on. And you have that. And that's every human being. You are going to be moved when you see those types of pictures.
Yeah.
So, as far as my position is concerned, I hope I've made that very clear as to where I stand, and that will be my position as far as my party is concerned. It's not going to be that if there's a vote, I'm going to vote against a Palestinian state. That's my position. Right. In terms of pro-Palestinian groups, it again goes back to my previous point that we are so disorganized in terms of lobbying that there seems to be no organized lobby, and I think that's something that needs to be sorted out.
Have you personally lobbied yourself on this issue?
In terms of lobby who?
Well, the
Okay, can I ask a question? Right. Okay. First of all, right, if you came in as the MP, would you be supporting the BDS campaign, even proposing the BDS campaign for the government to support boycotts against Israel? Because as you mentioned earlier, there's been so many attempts at peace. They've all fallen down. And at the end of the day, the reality is neither. There's no pressure, no additional pressure that's been put on. Yes, there's press releases that say these settlements are illegal and they're abhorrent. However, there's no pressure that goes after it. No. We've been listening to this from 1967.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm 43 years old, like yourself, born in the same year as well, which I noticed. Yeah. But the thing about it is, in all that time, what more pressure? South Africa had apartheid. Boycotts were imposed, and boycotts worked. Why not impose boycotts on Israel? Would you support that?
Well, I think in principle, yes, but we've had this boycott. We've had this boycott campaign for at least 10 years that I'm aware of.
Yes,
and unfortunately, it's the case that we as Muslims can't adhere to the boycott.
Well, hold on a second. Sorry, Imtiaz, I've got to stop you because you've mentioned that already with the Tesco issue and the Tesco boycott. There are a lot of people out there, a lot of listeners, a lot of voters who do adhere to the boycott, divestment and sanctions, and nationally, internationally as well, because this is an international campaign, and you see a lot of support for the BDS. The question really is, in Parliament, would you be willing to stand up and propose the BDS campaign, which is an international campaign?
Well, I think there's 2 points. One is that any produce from the settlements, which I think the European Parliament has actually accepted that any produce from the settlements should be boycotted because they've got a treaty with Israel in terms of a trade treaty, and I think the produce from the settlements falls outside that treaty. In terms of activities with Israel directly, that I just cannot see how you're going to enforce that. I mean, with whom?
Well, first of all, Chile haven't enforced that, haven't they?
Well, but Chile,
ultimately,
is Chile going to make a difference to the international scene? And
ultimately, the international community did enforce that against South Africa, and were able to do that.
Well, it was a separate. It was slightly different. I mean, here you've got to.
How isn't this also apartheid? Well, like you said, there's 1.6 million people.
What I'm saying is the situation is different. You have a very pro-Israel support from America. You have a fairly strong pro-Israel from the United Kingdom. If you go into many European countries, you go Australia, Canada, there's very pro-Israel support. So that particular campaign, I cannot see succeeding. I just can't see how it's going to succeed in the same way that you're referring to as far as apartheid in South Africa was concerned. So we can call for it.
Because and I haven't got the details with me here. And my apologies for that. But the former Israeli Prime Minister did make a remark only within the last 2 months, actually, about how much boycotting Israeli products has had an impact on their economy. Now, at the end of the day, for any government to take any serious action, it's when their economy is hit. You and I both know that.
Yes, but when America is giving, I think was it $3 billion or $4 billion in aid every year? I mean, how does that support? How is America going to support that?
When America is Britain's closest ally and friend, maybe it's time that Britain took a stronger stand.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the point I'm making, that as I said at the outset. I know you've made that point already, and my apologies for interrupting you, but this is where, if we're going to make a bigger stand as a nation, then don't you think it's time that the British government
puts a boycott on Israeli products.
Well, it's not going to happen. I mean, I'm trying to be practical about it. A UK government is not going to universally boycott Israel. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
Okay.
I can call for a boycott if I want. If I can say,
I think that's the point Mohammed was making.
I'm talking.
See, that's the point. That's the point I was making.
Are you willing to stand up and call for a boycott? Because even
of course I am. I mean, of course I am.
Yeah.
Because our point is this: that how do you stop illegal settlements?
Yeah.
What is the position that what is going to make Israel stop illegal settlements?
That's the point we're
There's
making.
two things. One is force, which isn't going to happen, because nobody is going to say, "Well, let's attack." The second is sanctions.
Yeah.
So we are pro-sanctions, saying unless you stop settlement activity, we will support any sanction to prevent you from doing that. Because if you look at the Crimea and what Russia did, the argument was that Crimea held a referendum and said we want to be part of Russia. The Palestinians have never said that we want our land to go to Israel.
No.
And what was the consequence? The consequences were severe sanctions on Russia.
Yeah.
Yet we don't get those same sanctions on Israel. So of course we call for sanctions. We can say, look, do whatever you can to stop them continuing with the settlements. Not just continue with the settlements, to actually give them a nation.
Right.
Because what we're arguing for is not to stop the illegal activity. We're saying that Palestine should be a two-state solution.
Yeah.
And that's our argument.
The argument isn't about whether the sanctions will work or not.
Yeah.
Just by imposing sanctions, it will delegitimize Israel and its activities, because it will make a strong point to the world that we're not accepting this.
Yep.
Yeah, and this is why I think we want you to say...
Yeah, that's a fair point. I thought you meant in the sense of, is this campaign going to stop Israel from my point was this: that if America is giving, I think, $3-4 billion a year, it's not going to stop trading with Israel.
But that's not our argument.
That's not the argument.
Our argument, in terms of as in me as an individual, yes, of course, anything that stops them from building settlements, but. Is it going to be effective? I mean, my view is it's not going to be.
As I said, it's a bit different point whether it's effective or not.
Yeah.
It's a principle that what principle do you hold? And would you, as an MP, be willing to stand up and say, yes, I'm for BDS?
Absolutely. I mean, anything that stops Israel from building, we will support that in terms of speaking out in Parliament, in terms of lobbying. We need to change that mindset where people think, well, we can march now and then forget in 2 months' time.
Okay, one final question on that. What have you, as a politician, done about this so far on an individual basis?
In terms of?
Campaigning for Palestine.
Well, after the last the incident in Ramzan, there was a couple of groups in Savile Town that were set up. We went to some meetings to see whether we could get something off the ground in terms of this sort of activity, where lobbying people. There was a campaign to lobby the local shops to prevent to not sell any Israeli produce. I think there's some Israeli dates that were being sold, and I think a lot of those people. So it was those types of campaigns.
Have you personally lobbied your own party or written to the MP or to the Prime Minister?
Yes, I have. I mean, I have lobbied our party. I think you've probably seen the answers that Simon Revell gave as well. In terms of the Member of Parliament, I mean, Mike Wood's position was very clear from the outset, so you knew where he stood. But in terms of those are the standard answers that you probably got, everybody else got.
So why haven't we seen you on a podium, vociferous about backing Palestine?
Well, nobody's invited me to stand on a podium. If someone invites me, I'll go and speak on any podium.
Right, okay, listeners, I hope you're listening.
So if you do want Imtiaz Ameen to stand on a podium and talk about Palestine, he's more than willing to come. Now then, I think we've missed a break, but don't worry, we're going to take a break now. Okay. You are listening to Radio IMWS, broadcasting live from the Al Hikmah Centre. This is the election special. Our guest today is the Conservative candidate for Batley and Spen, Mr. Imtiaz Ameen. Now then, we've actually got a lot to talk about yet, but we will be back with you just after a short break. If you do want to get in touch, you can do so by giving us a call 01924 505 629, or you can send a text or WhatsApp to 07460809218. We're going to take a quick break. Back after this.
Online and on your home receiver, you're listening to Radio IMWS.
If it's haram, then we'll get lots of guna.
Yeah.
It's not even 1% good, it's like 100%.
This is the Kids Zone on sunny Sunday afternoon, mashallah.
Isn't it so funny how we all walk around, never even thinking of the day under the ground. Come to IMWS, turn right and come into the Kids Zone. Read us a story, tell us a joke, do qiraat, a nasheed, a nazam or a naat.
If you get this right, you will be known as the first ever Radio IMWS Sunnah of Sleeping Champions.
To don't sleep, Niya Asr and Maghrib.
MashaAllah.
The Kids Zone, every Sunday 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. only on Radio IMWS. Join the discussion on Radio IMWS every Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday from 8 p.m. Topics include Islam, current affairs, health, legal, education and a weekly program delivered in Gujarati. You can join in by calling the studio on 01924 505 629 or send us a text or WhatsApp on 07460 809 218. For program schedules, visit www.imws.org.uk. If you would like to volunteer and be part of the Radio IMWS team, email radio@imws.org.uk or call 01924 500 555.
Special offer. Hire the Al Hikmah halls from Monday to Wednesday for just £28 plus VAT per hall. For more information, call 01924 500 555.
Bookings need to be a minimum of 2 hours and need to be booked 3 weeks in advance.
Radio IMWS.
Welcome back to Radio IMWS, broadcasting live from the Al Hikmah Centre in Batley, West Yorkshire. This is the election special with the Conservative candidate for Batley Spen Imtiaz Ameen, and with myself hosting Brother Muhammad, and also my co-host Ayub Bhai. Bismillah. Now then, if you want to get involved in the show, we did say 9 o'clock. I think we are going to go over, Imtiaz. I hope you haven't booked any restaurants for the evening, but we will be going over. So if you do want to get involved in the program, then you can give us a call on 01924 505 629, or you can send us a text or WhatsApp on 07460 809 218.
Okay, right. Imtiaz, it's estimated that the Asian vote in Batley and Spen will be the determining factor as to who will be elected. If we get a big turnout, the Asian or the Muslim vote will make a big difference. With this in mind, as a Conservative candidate, what is it that you can offer this community to make the difference for you at the ballot box?
Offer in terms of?
What are you going to offer the Muslim community in particular as an MP?
Well, I think the most obvious thing that you offer as a Muslim MP is a voice. I think me as a voter, and we've just discussed the Palestine issue, one of the biggest frustrations that we feel is that our voice is not being heard in Parliament. And by that I mean that what we as a community feel, what we as individuals feel, what we as families feel, isn't communicated to the powers that be that this is what we feel. So in terms of when it comes to elections, as you mentioned, everybody says the right thing about Muslims. This is what we'll do for Muslims, and this is how the Muslims should be voting, etc. Yet, in the intervening 5 years between elections, I'm not saying we're ignored, but I feel as a voter often that what I believe in, what I think should be said by some Muslim MPs who are already there is not being said. So that would be my biggest asset to the Muslims of Batley, that I've lived in this area. I have the same concerns that you have. I have children. You have children. The education, the health, obviously Palestine, other foreign issues, extremism, some parts where refer to Islamophobia. All those things affect me as they affect you. So I would like to think that as soon as it affects you in Batley, it's going to affect me as a voter anyway, regardless of whether I'm a member of Parliament or not.
I mean, the fear at the back of Muslim people's mind is, as a Tory MP, you might not be the right voice for them. I'll give you one example. I think one of your tweets said, about this letter that went out from Eric Pickles to about 1,000 mosques, I believe. Like, you tweeted that can't really see how this is patronizing or like the far right. A lot of Muslims feel completely otherwise, the other way. They think it is patronizing. They think and feel very strongly that this letter is asking, us to actually sort of sort out our imams.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I think my reading of the letter was completely opposite. What was being said was this. At the moment, radicalization takes place primarily on the internet. I mean, that's accepted by most people, that it's not taking place in the mosques. Our imams, I mean, if you go to, I think, 15, 16 mosques in Batley, I know of no imam in the last sort of 10, 15 years that this issue has been a hot topic, who has actually made a comment which can even remotely be regarded as radical extremist. So anybody who is being radicalized is being done via other sources, internet, CDs, etc. What this letter is saying, that as a government, there's only so much that we can do. The rest has to come from the community. And the way the people who will tackle this radicalization, the message that is going to be given is through our imams, in the sense that if a guy is on the internet and he listens to an extremely radical speech, he then goes to the mosque and he listens to what Islam actually is saying. So the challenge...
Do you think there are imams in our locality that are giving radical speeches?
No, I've just said that. I've actually said that. There's no imam that I know in Dewsbury, in Batley, anywhere locally,
can I change that
who's actually said anything radical.
Okay.
The radicalization is taking place on the internet. We have to counter that some way. And the best way to counter it is if on a Friday, if you just let me finish the sentence, if on a Friday, for example, our imam gives a speech which counters what's being said, that's the best way to counter it, because you and I are not qualified in terms of religion. I'm not. I don't know if you
No, I'm not.
background.
I'm not. I'm just an ordinary Joe.
Yeah,
but
so
I appreciate what you're saying there about the imam taking a stand. But isn't that again branding all Muslims as what's happening? I mean, there's this hysteria that's been created by media and politicians, which says that Muslims know who the terrorists are. The reality of it is, what you just said as well, is that all these imams, none of whom radicalize or speak, and all these masjids, and all these people, none of whom have anything to do with radicalizing anybody, none of them who know anything about any of these terrorist websites.
No, absolutely.
I mean, but what the letter's saying is that you do know, or rather the imams,
no, the letter's
and
not,
the imams should deal with it.
Well, I don't. If you have a copy of the letter, I would read it out to you. It doesn't say that. It in fact says the opposite.
But even sending it to the masjids is saying that the masjids are capable, about this happening in your community, when the reality is none of us do.
What it's saying is to challenge radicalization. Who is the best qualified to challenge radicalization? You and I aren't. The best person who counters that ideology, which says, the interpretation of Islam which says that it is okay to kill people who engage in the democratic process, it is okay to kill people in the market, it is okay to go in and blow somebody up. That ideology, who counters that? It's our scholars. Our scholars will counter that.
Do you think we're not doing that already?
We are. We have been doing.
So why do we need a letter?
It's just saying that what the letter is saying is we need your help even more. It actually says the British value of British Muslims are British values. It's very clear. There's complemented. It's what happens. For example, the Muslim Council of Britain, they say, because it wasn't consulted, this is patronizing. And that's what everybody picks up on. If you actually read the content of the letter, and I don't have a copy of it, it is anything but. It's engagement with it. We can agree to disagree on that.
Yes, we can agree to disagree, but let's just have if I can just say something. First and foremost, that letter was post-Paris. What incidents took place in Paris? Thousands of miles away. No one from Britain has had any links to anything that happened in Paris. And then the letter is sent to 1,000 masjids. Well, but that's pointing the finger at Muslim organizations in the UK.
I think we have to...
Isn't that associating...
I disagree with you. I think we have to move away slightly from this victim mentality. We are not victims. We are a successful community. We can't just take everything, a letter's come to us, oh my God, what's going to happen? No, we take it as it is. Read the letter, read the contents. Don't read anything in there which isn't in there. This is a minister who is trying to engage with the community. You might disagree. You might say that, no, this is patronizing. But we cannot look at everything that comes our way as victims. Okay. There is a problem within our community. We have to accept that. And this problem is of radicalization. It's a very small minority. But it is Muslims who are doing it. I mean, you have to accept that the radical,
but
the extremists are Muslims at the moment. Forget any other party. Let's deal with this. There's a very small minority of people who are Muslims who think it's okay to kill people. The biggest victims of terrorist activities are not any other country. They're Muslims.
Okay.
Look at Pakistan. Look at Syria. Look at Iraq. It's Muslims who are the victims. We have to challenge that ideology. It's all well and good saying, oh, we don't like this letter. It's patronizing. We need our imams. We need to give them our backing. We need to give them our support. When they do their speeches and they say Islam is peace, we have to stand behind them. We say, yes, we agree with you.
What the letter says is, one of the things it says is, imams must declare, and listen to this, more clearly than ever before, that Muslims should be proud to be British. Why more clearly than before?
Have we not always said
Isn't that a certain way of patronizing?
No, I mean...
Right. We've got some text messages coming, so I think we need to... let me just see. We just had another one come in. This listener sent in, there is no such thing as radicalization as we are led to believe. This is just to distract people. There are very terrorists. This is completely blown out of proportion by the Gobi and the media. My apologies, government, I believe, and media. My apologies. This is blown out of proportion by the government media. I don't know how Mr. Ameen is defending pickles. Now, I have to agree with that, but I've got another message that's come through as well, which I want to get onto. To add to that text message, as you've mentioned, rightfully so as well. There's a small minority of people who are becoming radicalized. Okay? Now, the thing about it, the vast majority don't even know who that small percentage is. The imams don't know. The people who are standing in namaz alongside them, they won't know. Their own families don't know. But isn't these things that the government do, like the letter, and there's other things involved as well, isn't that pointing a finger at the Muslim community as a whole?
No, I don't agree with that, no. I think
writing to 1,000 imams telling them...
Okay, let's take this. Let's take a chap in Batley, for argument's sake, as you say. Nobody knows who he is. He's been looking on the internet. He's fairly radicalized. He's thinking, well, this is what Islam says, and I'm happy to do this. Where does he get his counter message from? Who's going to give him his counter message?
That's the point.
Let me finish. He goes into the mosque on a Friday.
Yes.
And if, plenty of learned scholars, they do a speech and say, this is what Islam actually is, that's his counter to that radicalization is done. So the onus, I'm not saying we insist on the imam doing that every week. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that message at the moment does need to go out.
Right, okay. Can I just interrupt? I'm sorry. I've got to interrupt because it is a lot, what you've mentioned already as well. That counter argument is being delivered not just in the Jummah already. It's been delivered in the madrasas, where the teaching is there about wrongful killings, etc. Yeah. It's been taught there. Okay, yeah. So that teaching in a child, and the fact is, the whole issue of wrongful killing, because at the end of the day, terrorism, that's what it is, wrongful killing. That wrongful killing is something that is taught to a child from as younger age as you possibly imagine. Now, unfortunately, some people turn out to be bad. They turn out to kill people. Okay? There's prisons full of them. They're not all brown or they're not all Muslim. They're of all faiths. They're of all sizes. And terrorist organizations as well are of all faiths. I mean, the IRA, it wasn't that long ago we were talking about them. The point being that isn't the government, when they send a letter to 1,000 masjids, are they not then branding the entire community with the same rod?
I think where your analogy is wrong. When someone goes to prison for murder, for rape, for
do we ask for priests to stand and talk about why a person shouldn't rape?
If you let me finish what I'm trying to say. When these people go to jail, they don't justify their actions by saying that this is what Islam says is correct. That's where your analogy is wrong. When these people go to jail for murder, for rape, for whatever, they don't justify it in Islam. When the terrorists carry out their bombings, they're justifying it as an act permitted by Islam. That's the difference. Okay. So you cannot compare. You cannot compare the two.
Okay.
There is a difference.
But we've had a lot of Jewish people going to Israel to fight against Palestine.
That's a separate argument.
Hold on.
A separate argument.
It's similar though, isn't it?
No, it's not.
Has a letter gone out to the synagogues saying, stop these people going to fight in Palestine?
Yeah, and can I add to that, Andres Breivik, who clearly did what he did, and he's claimed his Christianity, was there a letter that went to churches?
Look, you're trying to put two issues together. If two issues if it's wrong, it's wrong. Look, one of the things that I have an issue with is this. if a person calling himself a Muslim carries out a terrorist activity, we have to. That is a problem for us. Islam, we know. We keep saying Islam is this. Islam. We know. We preach Islam. Okay, as in not me, as an individual.
We all do.
We all do.
Yeah.
The most qualified to tackle this ideology is our imams. When we sit, you must have sat with with a scholar and discussed these things with him. Just not as because you're thinking of doing that, but just as a general for knowledge purposes. All I'm saying is, if our imam repeats a speech he did 5 years ago again now, what harm is there? He's talking about the Quran. He's talking about the Hadith. He's talking about what Islamic scholars have said. To turn that into some sort of victim mentality, saying, we're patronizing. It's complete. I'm sorry, I completely disagree with you.
What it is we're not saying, it's not happening. And I know the ministers are saying it's not happening. The fact that it is happening and the fact that ministers don't know it's happening, why is there a need to write to mosques? Why don't they know about it? Why don't they know that?
Let me give you one example.
But, sorry,
just one example. Let me just give you one example.
But very, very quickly, because we need to move on.
I think it was about 3 years ago, the Muslim Council of Britain wrote to every single mosque and saying that we condemn terrorism. Why did they do that? Doesn't the Muslim Council of Britain know that we condemn terrorism? Doesn't the Muslim Council of Britain know that our imams are against terror? Yet they still did it. There was no outcry then. There was no patronizing claims then. But that was
Muslim Council of Britain saying that on their behalf, what they believe.
No.
Isn't it?
You cannot have...
They're not saying that mosques should do this.
No, they were saying that there was, I think, one incident where it said, on this Friday, can we have this speech going out from every mosque? I forget exactly which incident it was after. So when the Muslim Council of Britain tells our imams to do these speeches, it's fine. When somebody else says it, it's patronizing. This is what I'm saying. There's double standards. The reason we don't get anywhere sometimes is that we need to look at the actual issue. Just because a letter's come from a Tory community secretary doesn't make that letter wrong.
Okay, I think we're going to... we've dealt with this sufficient. I think everyone's made their positions clear, which is fair enough.
Fair enough.
And it's fair enough. That's the whole issue of... we can all differ. That we all have our own opinions. That's fine. There is a text message that I've got that's come in, which I do need to read out. It's a statement, not a question, but there's another one which I need to get onto as well. Okay, this one reads, Salams, I don't know what Mr. Ameen is on about. If he reads the letter carefully, it is very patronizing and making out as if we Muslims committed the barbaric atrocities in Paris. The timing of the letter is the timing of the letter is very unfortunate.
I'll concede that. I will concede that the timing wasn't right. That perhaps it could have been done a bit later, but in terms of the contents, I disagree with that.
Okay. Now moving on, because we did get this message actually a while ago. Right, okay, there is no such... sorry, not that one. The one before that one. Okay, here we go. What is Imtiaz's position on the CTS, the Counter-Terrorism and Security Bill? Does he agree with all aspects of the bill, or does he have concerns about the bill, as many Muslim organizations and individuals have? A bill that can be misused and target innocent Muslims.
I have a lot of concerns about the bill.
Okay.
There's about 6 proposals, and I think I probably disagree with about 5 of them. The first one is the ability to confiscate passports at the airport.
Yeah, rendering a person stateless.
No, before that.
Sorry.
Where you take somebody, where the border agency will have the right to confiscate somebody's passport and prevent them from travelling. The rendering somebody stateless again. I mean, these things at the moment they don't seem to be having sufficient judicial oversight. And it's a very dangerous area you go in where you take an arbitrary decision. It's a Guantanamo argument that just because you feel that a person is a terrorist, potentially you take a decision. If a person has actually engaged in terrorist activity, a British guy, and he seeks to return, well, on his return you can charge him, find him guilty, and sentence him. I think it's as we do now. The argument, I think, it's a treason argument that if somebody who lives in Britain shouldn't be fighting against the British state, which is absolutely right. But I'm very concerned that there's a civil liberties argument in terms of that proposal. There's another proposal to put on to universities and colleges an onus to report any, I think, radical discussion. Again, we're going into a position where what constitutes discussion and debate and what constitutes radicalisation. And all these things, I think, the bill is going a bit too fast for my liking at the moment, and we're only sort of 2 months away from the election being formally in the election period. So I do have several concerns about this. I'm not particularly happy with some of the provisions that are contained in that bill.
What have you done about it so far?
I've done very little about it at the moment. Except we're waiting for the next, because it went to House of Lords, there were some amendments. It's coming back to the Commons, and we'll have to see what the actual final proposals are.
It might become law next week.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's moving so quickly that there's very little. I mean, there's a few.
Are you saying that you've not done anything about it so far?
Well, no, I haven't done anything about it. I
mean, just to highlight some of the points. The Joint Committee on Human Rights mentioned that there is a very real risk that the human rights of UK nationals, including the right to return to one's country of nationality, will be violated as a result of the imposition. That's regarding the temporary exclusion, which you mentioned as well. The seizure of travel documents, the TPIMs. I mean, this legislation is terrifying. And it's not it's not wrong for Muslims to feel terrified about it, because when the word terrorism comes up, unfortunately we live in a society, and it has been very media driven if you really look at it, and very politically driven. People think that it's Muslims. More than 500 university professors lodged an open letter, and they mentioned that they're deeply concerned, and that this legislation will place an unlawful and unforeseeable duty on educational institutions and staff. There's so many academic freedom, etc., which they're concerned about. Officers who can stop people on reasonable suspicions. People can be made stateless for 2 years.
Yeah.
Where are they going to go? I mean, you and I were both born in the UK.
That is the argument, that where do these people go and who's going to take them? So if they're, I don't know, if from Syria they end up in Turkey and they want to come back, then there is a process where you can have an interview, and there is a process of coming back. But again, it's like you say, you are then a stateless. If you don't go to that interview, you'll
be exiled for 2 years.
You'll be exiled for 2 years. The thing is, I know you say if you don't go to that. I know you say that, but the thing is, we're looking at courts which are going to be secret courts, where a person is not going to be able to represent themselves. Absolutely. They're not going to be able to be represented by somebody either, and that's one of the amendments that have been requested.
Exactly. I mean, there's some of those amendments that have been put forward by a lot of civil liberty groups.
Yeah.
Obviously, we haven't seen the next sort of the bill that's come back. But just on that final point, in terms of stateless, I mean, if it's not exile, it's where do they go? If for example, Turkey then says we're not going to have this person, where does that person go? I mean, that's a concern, and again, the TPM as well, a person can be removed from his family, from his home, told to, for example, from Batley, go and live in,
I think that's just one aspect of it, isn't it?
There's several.
There are far-reaching implications. I mean, as part of the PREVENT program, for instance, it might criminalise Islamic practices like prayers, niqab. Universities and schools and hospitals, they all have implications for that. Nursery children even... they might wind up being analysed for signs of radicalisation.
One of the problems we've had with this government, previous governments, whenever there's a terrorist incident wherever, the first port of call seems to be legislation, and I think it's the seventh or eighth piece of terror legislation, and it's, as you say, we feel uncomfortable with all these restrictions that are being placed on a gradual basis.
Okay, so what should happen? Let's cut the chase. What should happen now?
As this piece of legislation,
do you think MPs should vote against it?
I think yes.
Have you told Simon Reevell to vote against it?
I haven't spoken to Simon about it.
Why not?
Well, I haven't yet. But
this is something really crucial. It's going to affect all the Muslims in the country, and you've not even spoken to your own MP yet.
I haven't yet. No.
Right.
I'm just waiting to see how the final bill comes out.
It's going to be too late. By next week, it will be long.
Well, no, it's not. I mean, you need to see the bill. I can't just sort of say,
the thing about it is, I'm sorry, but it has been through 5 readings in the Commons.
Yes,
it has then entered into the 5 readings in the House of Lords. Now, the bill was, terrifying. The Joint Committee on Human Rights has made a number of recommendations from the outset. Now, when it was in the Commons, surely your members of your party, Simon Reevell included, as well as others, you could have instigated and you could have said, look, this is very scary, and for people to stand up and do something about it.
Well, there have been Conservative MPs who have made representations against the bill on the civil liberties argument. I think it's going through at the moment, as like you say, with some changes, and unless some more people vote against it, it will go through. I mean, that's unfortunate from my point of view. There has been, again, I would say the final version we haven't seen in terms of some of the recommendations that Liberty and all the other groups have made. So we wait to see what's going through. If it goes through in 5 days' time, there's not much more, much I can do about it because it's going to go to a vote. But in terms of the actual final bill, we can't. Until you see
surely 5 days. 5 days is still time to do something.
Oh yes, absolutely. We'll see what the bill is. There is a group in the Conservative Party who has made very strong representations, both in the Commons and in the Lords, as far as this bill is concerned. Now, in the end, it's going to come down to voting. That's the bottom line.
Right.
Which way it votes.
Can I ask, because this bill was actually, it began its life in November. And by January the 12th, it had already gone through all the stages. It was already in the House of Lords receiving its second or third reading. Second reading. And it's presently in its third reading. All it's got is to go to consideration for, after the consideration for amendments to royal assent. Yeah. Now, the thing is, this has been fast-tracked through. In the period that this has been happening, Paris happened. Now, Paris didn't happen at the start of this. Paris, if I remember rightly, Paris happened after this bill was actually started. Yeah. But there's a lot of linkage defending the bill to the attacks in Paris. Now, this is the question. Now, this is the problem that we've got. As Muslims, we're looking at, and it's not just Muslims, it's human rights groups as well, are looking at what is a proposed conservative legislation, which Theresa May has proposed, which is going through at a rapid pace, and seems to and is terrifying Muslims in that you can't openly talk. If you openly... No, hold on a second. 500 university professors say on an academic discussion, they can't have an academic... There's no exaggeration
Let's
there.
not exaggerate. Deal with what it says. We can talk. It doesn't say we cannot talk. It's saying that if there is talk of radicalization, that it's what definition of radicalization is. But you don't need to exaggerate and say we can't talk.
So what it comes down to in the end, even if you look at the passport issue,
I'll agree. It's not a great piece of legislation.
It's a little bit like the stop and search thing.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's what a particular officer might feel what's reasonable.
Yeah.
And what we all know what happened with the stop and search legislation.
Yeah.
It went horribly wrong.
Yeah.
And there's potential for this to happen
Absolutely.
with this.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I said I have concerns with it. I don't disagree.
But you haven't done anything about it.
Well, I will. Once the final version is gone through. In terms of what I can do at the moment, I'm not an MP.
Have you told Simon Reevell to vote against it?
I haven't told Simon.
I'm sorry. I know what you've said. You said a moment ago, and I want to define this because I want to quote this letter that has been signed by over 500 university professors from across the country. Now, they've very clearly made the point: this proposed legislation is both unnecessary and ill-conceived. It also makes the point ensures that the freedom of speech within the law, or amendments are made to ensure that the freedom of speech within the law is secured for members, students, and employees of the establishment, and for visiting speakers. And it says draconian crackdowns on the rights of academics and students will not achieve the ends. This is strong stuff. These are educated academics.
But it still doesn't say you can't talk, does it?
Well, essentially, it does, doesn't it?
No, it does not. It says there'll be curbs on freedom of what you can potentially say, but it still doesn't say where you can't talk.
Who's going to judge that?
Yes, who's going to be judging that?
Well, that's the concern that you have. It's going to be some independent body which will decide that this is radicalized.
Will it be? How independent is it going to be?
This is what I'm saying, that if this legislation goes through, there are concerns that I expressed earlier on. I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with what you're saying. But I'm saying I'm saying that just don't exaggerate what it actually says. It's not saying that you can't talk. There will be restrictions on what is defined as radicalization. That's going to be the concern.
I'm sorry, I have to differ with you because when the university, over 500 university professors have said, it's good that as it stands, the freedom of speech within the law is, it's going to affect freedom of speech for students, for members, students, employees, and visiting speakers. I think if it's going to, that means that there's going to be. You're saying it's going to curb. I'm saying that I'm sorry. I think it's going to be more than curb. It's going to be a case of I have to watch every word I say.
No, I mean, I think
As Ayub mentioned, the prevent strategy is getting pushed out into nurseries.
I mean, just imagine somebody going for Umrah or Hajj, and at the airport, some bright sort of officer thinks, there's a reasonable suspicion that this person might be leaving to engage in terrorist activities. His passport's going to be taken away.
well, there is a right.
All his planning.
It can happen now. If the police
But
officer.
now this will legalize
But
it.
what I'm saying is, at the moment, it happens as it is, as things stand. That if there is reasonable suspicion that a person is going to leave the country to engage in terrorist activity, they can stop them. That's what's happened to quite a few people recently. I agree with what you're saying, that the profiling might change in the sense that if you have a beard, perhaps, or if you're a particular type of person, they may think, well, is he going to engage in terrorist activity? And it's what we discussed right at the outset. I mean, it is a concern where we had with the stop and search powers, where a particular coloured person would be stopped. Why? Because of his colour, regardless of even if he's got a nice car, he'd be stopped. So is it stolen? So I absolutely agree. There are concerns.
It's the issue of reasonable suspicion. Can I just read this text message out? It is a statement. It's not a question, but the listener has sent it in, and we want to hear what listeners have to say. Listener says, "Salams. By his own admission, it's unbelievable if a prospective parliamentary candidate has not done anything about the bill. How one can have confidence in him if he can't seem to take such an issue seriously?" Now, like I say, it is a statement rather than a question. But I do have a question. Now, you mentioned there recently people who wanted to go over to Syria, because essentially this bill is all about preventing people from going overseas and fighting. That's what it's about. Now, as you've mentioned, those powers already exist. So why bring in a new bill like this?
Well, again, I as I said at the outset, that I have reservations about why this is necessary. I mean, if someone has been engaged in terrorist activity like we had today, I forget his name, but he's been sentenced to 12 years. If somebody goes abroad, I think that the rationale, I think, behind it, I'm assuming the rationale behind it is that they don't want anybody who potentially could carry out a terrorist activity back in the country. But in a liberal democracy, you have to face everything that's thrown at you. And just because people engage in terrorist activity, it doesn't mean that you lose those principles of a liberal democracy. And I think some of the legislation now and previously has meant that those principles, the foundations of a liberal democracy have been eroded, civil liberties have been eroded because of the fear of terrorism. And it's, this is a conservative government-led legislation, but in going back the last 12, 15 years, we've had lots and lots of legislation. Every single time there's a terrorist activity, another piece of legislation comes in, further erodes civil liberties, further concerns the Muslim community. I think this is another piece of legislation in the same vein.
I think the difference is, in the past, there's been more time to scrutinise.
I think. I don't disagree with
there's
that.
There's not enough time to, scrutinise it properly by, the appropriate lawyers.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with that.
I mean, I'm sure
it's just been rushed through a bit. Like you say, it should have at least 2-3 months of time to read it and to understand it, because I mean, it is a fairly weighty document. It's not, you can't just, and there are lots of consequences of certain activities. I think it should have been taken.
Right. Okay. I think we need to wrap up on this, but we do want to ask you, Imtiaz. We wanted to put you. You're in the hot seat. We want to ask you because obviously, I mean, our listeners out there want to know as well.
Yeah.
We've talked about the counter. You agree that it's been rushed through. You agree that there's a lot of things in there you would not want in. What are you going to do about it?
Well, let's see when it comes on. Is it what are we now? I think it's Monday, Tuesday. It's going to be put again before Parliament. I mean, it was discussed yesterday. Was it yesterday or the day before in the House of Lords?
It was on the 4th.
Yeah, so it's going to come again in the next day or so. Let's read it. Let's make some representations. I think that's all we can do in terms of. I'm to be honest, I am a bit surprised that Theresa May has actually brought this through, because if you listen to her speech in the conference speech, she was very critical of the stop and search and powers, and so it's slightly inconsistent. She's a part of the party which you would perhaps describe as more centre based, and so it is a slight it's slightly odd that she has proposed this piece of legislation.
Well, the inconsistency, I'm sorry.
Well,
I'm sorry,
all politicians are inconsistent. I mean, it's not.
No. I'll give it to most politicians. But the inconsistency. I mean, we know the situation with two men, both accused of terrorist charges, both with the same illness. One got extradited, the other one got protected by Theresa May.
Absolutely.
So when you talk about inconsistency, I think it was Talha, I forget his surname, my apologies, who got extradited. But Mr. was it McCain or something by his name? I've forgotten, Paul McCain or something. My apologies, I can't remember the name. The Muslim got extradited.
I think McCain did get extradited. It was one that
she protected him. He got released.
Was one that got extradited.
There was another one, but not him.
Okay.
Not him. And both of them suffered from the same illness. And in fact, actually, both of them were supposedly have done the same crime as well. Okay, we are going to take a quick break. We've got a few more Imtiaz. I hope you're enjoying yourself here, mashallah, because we do want to get to know. It's important. We said it at the start. It is important for listeners for voters rather, to know who they are voting for, what the policy stands for. And we're and I have to say, Jazakallah Tawfiq for being so honest. It's important for a person to take a stand. I do agree with that, because if you're not going to stand up for what you think, whether the rest of the people in the room agree with you or not, how are you going to stand up in Parliament if you agree? If you're just a yes man? So I've got to say I admire you for that. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. 1 minute 45 seconds it says on this break. After that, we will be right back with you.
Online and on your home receiver, you're listening to Radio IMWS. Join the women-only over 50s Elderly Lunch Club every Monday from 12 p.m. till 3 p.m. at the Al Hikmah Center. Enjoy a meal in the company of friends, as well as gentle exercise routines, including the use of treadmills and exercise bikes. That's the Over 50s Elderly Lunch Club every Monday from 12 p.m. till 3 p.m. at the Al Hikmah Center on 28 Track Road, Batley, WF177AA. For more information, call 01924 500 555. Reach your customers through our radio, magazines and website with competitive rates advertising on Radio IMWS, Begum, An-Nisa and the IMWS website could give your business the boost it deserves. For more details, email info@imws.org.uk or call 01924 500 555. It is related by Sayyidina Anas radiallahu anhu that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, when a man marries, he has completed half of his religion, so let him fear Allah regarding the remaining half. The Al Hikmah Nikah service launched by the IMWS aims to introduce prospective marriage partners to help fulfill this important aspect of faith. The service is open to unmarried Muslims who are permanent residents of the UK. For more information, visit our website at www.imws.org.uk.
Radio IMWS.
Welcome back to Radio IMWS, broadcasting live from the Al Hikmah Center. It is the election special. We were planning for 1 hour, but that's gone out of the window. That's well out of the window. Okay, this is election special in the hot chair. We do have Imtiaz Ameen, the Conservative candidate for Batley and Spen. And there have been some very difficult questions. Jazakallah to everyone who's been sending them in. Keep them coming. We did receive a message during the break. It's actually, I think, correcting me more than anyone else. Talha Ahsan and Gary McKinnon. Those were the two people.
Right,
same condition, illness. I believe the same. Both were accused of hacking in and for terrorism purposes. One was hacked. I think Gary McKinnon hacked into the CIA or the FBI. One was extradited, and Theresa May fought very hard to extradite him. The other, Theresa May, fought very hard not to extradite, which is unfortunate. Okay, right now then, moving on to the next point. Right, okay. Sadly, within Parliament, we've seen a lot of issues regarding Muslims. Now, one of your colleagues, again, unfortunately, Philip Hollowborn, who is the MP for Kettering, I believe, he's twice since the Conservatives won the last election raised bills about banning of the veil.
Yeah.
Both to be honest with you, the second bill had very little difference from the first. I think there was 2 words changed on the bill. That's about it. We've got that. Then we've got the whole issue of halal unstunned slaughter, which continues to gain more and more precedence. Now, all this is adding to this feeling that they're out to get us. Okay. Now, we said at the start of the show, of the program, it's not just about, people are not just looking at, the voter isn't just looking at voting for a candidate. They are actually looking at voting for a party. Now, when you have a party who twice have tried to ban the burqa.
No.
An MP. Sorry, my correction. An MP from a party who has twice attempted to ban the veil.
And both times he was dismissed. The action was dismissed. I mean, I know the MP you're talking about. He put forward 2 bills. Both were defeated. So that's all I can say.
But on the second time, it was supported by more people.
It may have been, but I mean, he's not.
And the main objectors.
He doesn't speak on behalf of the party. That's the point I'm trying to make.
That's the point you're trying to make. That's fair enough.
In terms of my position regarding both, I mean, I wrote an article on this. There's a Conservative Home website. I think about 4 or 5 years ago, when Jack Straw mentioned that when somebody comes into his office, he asks them to take off the vest. So I did write an article on that. As far as halal slaughter is concerned, if you go back to 2004...
Just to go back, what's your position on the burqa?
My position? I mean, people can wear what they want. We live in a democratic society. We don't tell anybody what to wear, what not to wear. So if a woman wants to wear a burqa, she's entitled to do so.
And have you said that to the MP in Kettering?
Well, I haven't. I sent it to him. I mean, I wrote an article on this.
It seems strange that an MP with 0.7% of a Muslim population finds this a problem.
I don't know what his problem is, to be honest with you. He has a lot of slightly odd views, so it's not just on this particular point.
Right, okay. Now, the other issue we're seeing at the moment is, I mean, unfortunately, at the moment, Muslims are getting attacked from all flanks, is the halal unstunned slaughter. Now, there's a lot of support, of course, within the Muslim community and within the Jewish community regarding kosher as well, because they're both exactly the same. And there's a lot of support for the unstunned, non-mechanical slaughter. And now that's getting raised more and more. Is that something that we can see coming into Parliament or in the next in the next 5 years? And if so, which side will you stand on?
In 2004, there was a Farm Animal Welfare Council report which said exactly the same thing, that the exemption that currently applies for Jews and Muslims should be removed. At that time, I started a petition in Dewsbury, and we got around 6,000 signatures. And I handed that petition into Downing Street, campaigning to keep that exemption. There's an organisation from the Jewish community called Shahita UK. They did some very effective lobbying as well at that time. So at that time, that was parked. And Theresa May was the Conservative Party chairwoman at that time. And she was very supportive of this, of me going to the to hand the petition in. So it was David Liddington was the shadow environment minister, and he accompanied me, and we handed that petition into Parliament, into Downing Street. So that was defeated at that time. There's been no proposals since then by any party to remove that exemption. But as you say, there are some noises being made at the moment, and I think yesterday or the day before, UKIP said that we'd remove this practice of not stunning animals. As far as I am concerned, as far as we are concerned as a community, we have to fight that as strongly as possible, because it is a very important aspect of our lives. I mean, we all eat meat. I mean, there's very few Muslims that you'll find that are vegetarian. So, I mean, it's something that we need to campaign pretty vigorously for. And, I did do it 10 years ago. I'll do it again.
Right, okay. But you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think I take your point on, it's important that we work together on that. Yeah. Just to come back on something different now, the other point you mentioned at the beginning of the program was about, and we're going back at it a bit now, about sporting and cultural facilities. Yeah. And I know on your website you're talking about helping to improve local education provision by promoting and supporting more free schools and academies, and improving the sporting and cultural facilities for young people. I mean, are you for academies and free schools?
Yes.
Why?
Well, it gives independence, autonomy to a school to broaden the curriculum, gives it that independence away from the local authority.
But don't you think most of the academies that sprung up are not all that doing that all that differently to comprehensive schools?
No, they're doing very well. The academies are doing well. I mean, bear in mind, academies was a Labour Party policy. It wasn't a Conservative. It wasn't introduced by the Conservative government. It was initially started by the Labour under Tony Blair. It was started. My personal view is this: I think the more independence a school has, the better. And I know that some people think, we have to have the oversight from the local authority. If you look at the best independent school, I mean the fee-paying schools, they have an incredible amount of autonomy. They have a lot of money, obviously, which allows them to do a lot of things, it depends a lot on the head teacher. The onus then falls on the head teacher. You are in charge of X number of children, produce the results, as opposed to having more control from the local authority. And it's that trust. If a head teacher is competent, qualified, we have to trust that head teacher to deliver the best education, as opposed to some bureaucrat sat in Kirklees town hall somewhere, dictating to a certain degree what they want doing, or from London. So the more autonomy you have, I think the better the results that are produced in the long term, especially because you're relying on a professional to do his job, as opposed to somebody else dictating to him this is how it should be done.
Do you think that's the case with academies and free schools, or is it the case that the school is governed by a local supermarket? For example.
Well, you mean the chains of thing? Well, whoever governs that. I mean, let's take your argument that a supermarket chain is in control of a school, but the ultimate responsibility will lie with the head teacher. That what are you doing to ensure that the qualification is good? That it's the same argument what you're making in terms of control. If this head teacher doesn't produce the results, where does the buck stop? The buck stops with the supermarket chain.
So what do they know about education?
Well, they don't.
So
what the supermarket in itself is doing is relying on the head teacher. It's allowing other different models of opening a school. So, for example, the best example I can give you is our madrasas. They operate on a very similar system. Here's a madrasa. A lot of it is reliant on the actual teacher or the head teacher. There's a great emphasis. The committee can say, look, we want you to produce X results, but the ultimate responsibility goes to the head teacher, goes to the imam. And I think more autonomy has to go to the head teacher, more autonomy has to go to the teacher. There has to be flexibility. For example, in this area, for argument's sake, we've become a very good finance sector here. Now, we have to have some flexibility, saying if there's X number of jobs in the finance sector, we'd rather have some expertise in this field.
Don't you think involving the local government, local authority would do a better job than just leaving it all to one individual?
No, it's not in one individual. I meant in terms of the responsibility, we'll stop with the head teacher, but it's not just the head teacher, it's the whole...
It's the head teacher and the supermarket.
The head teacher and the teachers at the school. The more autonomy you grant a school, the better it will do. That's proven with the fee-paying schools. They do it because they've got money, and they've got a lot more money.
No, the fee-paying schools get some students who are of that calibre.
Well, because they can provide the education
because
standard.
They've been they've gone through testing.
No, then you're...
Sorry, if I just interrupt on that. But with the fee-paying schools, the thing about what you've got there is per child, you have got money coming in.
Exactly.
Now, with the academies, the problem you've got is that, yes, you might have someone back in it. You might have X amount of funds in year one, but year two, those funds might come down.
No, but the money comes from the government. It's not as if there's no money coming from the government. The government will fund the schools, but the funding comes directly. There's no in-between like with the local authority. The funding will come directly to a free school. The free school, the model of governance is different, where the school is responsible. So, for example, where an academy is failing, where a free school is not doing so well, the government will send people in to oversee, and you've seen that recently in a few academies. It'll get taken over by another chain, or it might get, the government might send some inspectors in to carry out an inspection. There's a degree of autonomy. What is proposed is a degree of autonomy, the breaking that link with the local authorities that we have. And for example, I don't remember exactly the figure, but when I was a councillor, I think for every £6 that the school was getting, £1 was being taken by the local authority in terms of the bureaucracy. So that all disappears. And what is the great role that a local authority is playing?
Okay.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you what, the local authorities, they play an enormous role in terms of supporting teachers, supporting the school, in terms of providing the training, the monitoring and various
no,
things.
But that can be done with, you've got Ofsted to monitor, you've got other things.
No, Ofsted doesn't come in every week.
No, it doesn't, but I'm saying...
And you can't ring Ofsted, if you've got a problem with an issue.
But well, if a teacher's qualified, why does it continuously need to be overseen by the local authority, who is, in effect, a bureaucrat? He's not a teacher, he's a bureaucrat. So why does a teacher need to be overseen by a bureaucrat? It's the MOS system. Why does a teacher who's teaching need to be told by a committee member, this is the way you should teach? He's qualified to teach a child. That's what he studied. He studied for 8 years to teach children. If a committee man says, well, I think you should teach like this, well, it makes no sense.
Okay, so as an MP, for Batley Spen, you'll be developing some free schools and academies.
Well,
we've got an all-boys school in Batley.
It's not for me to develop anything. It's the decision of a school to decide how it wants to be governed. It's not my decision.
Okay.
That's the whole point.
Fair point,
the MP or the councillor or the local authority.
Okay. You would support that. You would support academies
Absolutely.
and free schools.
If a school wants to, if that's a direction a school wants to go in, I absolutely will support it.
We've got an all-boys school in Batley.
Yeah.
What are your views about single-sex education?
Well, it depends. If a school prefers single-sex education, there's no harm in it.
So at the same time, you've got an all-girls school as well. I must say.
No, I'm just saying. I have no issues in terms of an all-girls school, all-boys school. Whatever suits the school. It depends on how they teach. Look, you have lots of schools again in the private sector. In the free-paying sector, is all boys, all girls. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, a few years ago, we did see a lot of academies popping up. We've seen that come to a bit of a halt now. Do you want to tell us why?
I don't agree with that. I think I forget the exact figure. That's very shortly. There's another quite a large batch of free schools academies going to be opened. I don't know if it's next year. It will presumably be in September. I forget the exact number, but I don't see it. I don't know where you got that figure from. That it's come to a halt.
Okay, we have got a question come in on this. It's asking us, assalamu alaikum, asking Imtiaz, what is your opinion about BBG Academy, a school located in Berkshire, supported by David Cameron and got inadequate special measures by Ofsted recently. Is that a successful independent school?
It has had its difficulties, but the system is in place, and measures were taken to change that. Just because a school has a particular issue doesn't mean the whole system's flawed. One school that's failing or one school that's failed or it's not done well doesn't mean the whole system's not right. If we're going to point to PVG as an academy that's not done well, we can point to a few other schools within the state sector that's not done well either. So I think singling out a school is not the right way to go about it. It's a system. Do we say, I am pro free schools, I am pro academies? Is somebody else might be against those? It's not. One school isn't going to be indicative of the whole system.
Okay, I'm not familiar with this academy. I don't know if Ayub Bhai is familiar with this.
Well, it's in Berkshire.
But the question I want to ask is, prior to becoming an academy, what was the school like? Does anybody know?
It was a middle school. It was Berkshire, I think it was middle, and it was then taken into it was just closed, and then it was when we had this change from the three-tier structure to the two-tier. There was changes then because some schools even now operate as a junior school, a middle school, and a high school, and there's some schools that operate on a two-tier system.
In terms of raising standards, for pupils in Batley and Spen. What are you proposing? Have you got any plans in mind?
In Kirklees, our government spent around £22 million giving extra funding to schools in Kirklees. So the schools are well supported. The school's budget was ring-fenced. There is money there. In terms of tackling underachievement, we have moved to more robust examinations at GCSE level. Obviously, you might have seen some recently with some of the changes, and some of the schools that were doing particularly well suddenly having the results come down a bit because of a new rigorous system. So there's been some changes to the curriculum under Michael Gove. So there has been a mini revolution taking place in terms of what is taught in schools and the standards that are required. Because we have to understand we're competing not now just within the UK, we're competing globally. And you will know, from some of the standards in terms of IT and the technology sector, particularly in South India, are incredibly high, and that's what we're competing against. And we can't mollycoddle pupils. We need to give them academic rigor, so that when they leave school, they're in a very strong position to decide what they want to do in terms of further education, in terms of apprenticeships, or in terms of something else. But we need to give them that excellent grounding until the age of 16. And I think the free schools program, the academies, I think is a step in the right direction.
There was a report from the House of Commons Education Committee not long ago, which basically said, there's no proof that academies work or they raise standards. Now, I know the Prime Minister's keen to sort of look at sort of failing schools and turning them into academies. Do you agree with that?
Agree with
turning failing schools into academies?
Yes, I'm very pro academies, very pro free schools. I mean, I have I'm very supportive of the program.
You've got a report here from the House of Commons Education Committee, which showed that academies don't raise standards.
Well, I mean, I disagree with that, because the things that I've read about academies, it shows that they do raise standards. That autonomy means that they have greater control, greater discipline. And as I mentioned before, the headmaster has a lot more freedom to teach and deal with that school as he likes.
What really raises standards is the teachers and the teaching.
Yes.
Not the academy status.
Well, yes and no. You need to give the teachers the right environment to teach. I mean, we have, obviously, you've seen the changes that we made to teachers.
There are a lot of schools which are not academies are doing brilliantly. Right? And that's because of the teaching that goes on in those schools. And it's the quality of teaching that, raises standards. And not, because there are
there was a lot of bureaucracy. You will know as a teacher that there was a lot of bureaucracy within the school system, that some head teachers and some teachers were complaining of the bureaucracy that was there. That's been gradually removed to a certain extent. Of course, a good teacher is the most important part of a good school. I mean, that's the starting point. Unless you have a good teacher, you're not going to have a good school. And that is why we've, the salaries that are now being paid for, you've got your super teachers and that the salaries that are being paid are high. The emphasis has been given that this promotion will be better within that system. So we are supporting teachers on that front. It's just giving teachers the autonomy to teach.
But then there are plans to bring in non-teaching assistants in to do teaching jobs.
Well, they exist at the moment anyway, don't they?
Well, no, there are plans to increase all that.
Yes, but you have classroom assistants who are non-teachers, who are not qualified teachers.
Should they be teaching in the classroom?
Well,
as a teacher,
I think you need to be, we need to
supporting, yes, assisting, yes.
When you say non-teachers, let me say this: what we're talking about is perhaps an expert in a particular field, or somebody who's practiced in a field for 20, 30 years, going into the classroom to teach and not having that 1 year qualification you're talking about. So these people who we're referring to are experts in their fields teaching. You have universities who have visiting professors, visiting lecturers who work in the city, but they'll spend 2 days in the college giving a lecture. Why? Because they've got expertise in that particular field. They don't have a formal educational qualification, but we can't dismiss them as somebody who's unable to teach.
I take your point. And somebody who's got good subject knowledge can impart that knowledge. Yeah. But doesn't make that person a good teacher, because he hasn't got the skills to teach. He's got the skills to impart that particular knowledge. Fine,
but that's
where it stops.
Can I just interject? There is a difference between someone going into a university, which is a much more mature place of learning, and a school. And you rightfully said there. But what's going to happen is you're going to put someone who is a specialist in a field into a classroom to teach children, and he's going to be cutting his teeth my apologies. He or she is going to be cutting their teeth in actual teaching a live class. That class is then going to go on to take on examinations.
I think you're trying to show that these people are going to come in and start teaching 4 and 5 year olds. No, these people are going to teach a particular subject. For example, if there's an expert in, say, for argument's sake, if there's a lawyer who then, in school, for argument, if law is being taught on a particular topic, I don't see why he can't have. He doesn't have that knowledge and the required skills to do it, because you're going to understand that I know from the legal background that lawyers give lectures, they give training, they give that's how they train people. Yeah. So I think it's not a blanket. You can't dismiss it on a blanket scale, we can't have any of this. Of course, there are concerns that you just raised, but I don't think you blanketly say, on a blanket basis, you say, well, we're not having any of these guys because they're not qualified. They are qualified. They've got 20 years of life experience in a particular field. I don't see why they can't qualify to teach in a classroom.
Because isn't teaching a field in itself?
No, it is. Of course it is. But what I'm saying is it's not going to be suddenly all teachers are going to disappear.
Right.
You'll have 99% it's a very small minority we're talking about.
It's a growing minority.
Why? I don't know. I mean, I don't agree with that. I mean, I think at the moment there's very few. I mean, if you look at the numbers in local schools, you'll know better than I will. How many are there in local schools that are not qualified teachers?
Well, I've not done the count.
Well,
but
I'm saying that's my point. There's very few
the
that you don't need to do the count.
How many?
It's on the increase.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Well,
How many?
I don't have a figure. I mean, I don't know.
Right, okay. We have got a message that's come in. Assalamu alaikum. There are free Muslim schools for girls.
Yeah.
There are free Muslim schools for girls in towns like Blackburn and Bolton. How come there is not one in Batley?
Well, you need to do the application. You have to make the application to become a free school, and the Blackburn one is extremely successful. I think it's a Tawheedul Islam. I think is that
in Blackburn? Yes,
that's the one that's supporting. I think it's now controlling 3.
I believe so.
I think there's 3 schools now under that umbrella, and I think they've got fantastic results. I think one of the schools got something like 80-90% pass rate in GCSEs.
Okay,
so.
I've got another.
Submit the application.
Submit the application.
That school needs to submit the application.
Okay. I've got another question here. Conservatives have said, this is from someone else, conservatives have said that if they win next election, they will cut school funding by 10%. How does that help students' schools? Will this not reduce the resources required to give a good level of education?
Where's that from? That conservatives have said? Because I've not seen that.
It has been reported recently.
It's been reported. We wait to see the manifesto pledge. But I mean, we as I just said, £22 million extra has come into Kirklees for schools in the last 4 or 5 years. So our commitment to schools has been, it's there. The figures prove that.
Right, just to talk a little bit about Muslim schools and the recent furore in Birmingham about the so-called Trojan horse issue. You're aware of it, aren't you? Do you think that was a bit of a sort of a setup and a witch hunt against schools that had a lot of Muslim governors and Muslim pupils?
I don't know about a witch hunt. I mean, there were some practices, I think, that raised concerns in terms of a secular education. I mean, it's going down the route of that wasn't a Muslim school per se. It was a secular school, and I think some of the things that they were doing were of concern to people who were saying a secular school should be run in a certain way. For example, the azan in the playground, I think, was one example that was given. I think the other one was, I think it was a trip to, was it Umrah, I think, or was it just to Saudi, where non-Muslim pupils wouldn't be allowed? I think it was one of that. I think one of the governors said something. I mean, it was, I do think it was blown out of, I'm not saying all proportions, I think there was concern. I mean, I accept there were concern, but perhaps it could have been handled a bit better. It goes back to governance, that if the governing body, I mean, when you have an Islamic school, there's a certain mindset, certain dress code, etc. When this was I think this school was being operated, what people felt was, this is like an Islamic school when it's a secular school. I think that was the biggest concern. And instead of dealing with the issues like you would a failing school, I think it was slightly blown out of all proportion, and this is radicalization, etc. That's what kicked it all off.
Also, what followed afterwards, wasn't it, in terms of on-the-spot inspections and how inspectors actually dealt with a number of schools across the country, even as near as Bradford, for instance. And there were some schools who were actually doing quite well, and when inspectors walked in, they actually found trivial faults and failed them.
Yeah, I mean, I think just on the inspection point, no school should fear an inspection in terms of, as a general rule, come whenever you want, we've got nothing to hide. But as you say, that if you then start nitpicking where every single minor point is taken to mean this school is not operating well.
Just to give an example, there was one inspection where, inspector asked an 8-year-old about Sharia law.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
what is that child going to say?
I mean, Ofsted have been accused of becoming politically motivated, and Muslim schools who are getting outstanding ratings suddenly found themselves being investigated for all sorts. And it was ridiculous, to be quite honest. There were 6 schools in London, for example, which were being investigated. And that was in the news. Politicians were making a big deal of it. Government was making a big deal of it. 2 miles down the road, there was another school which was not a Muslim school, which had no, there was the Muslim pupils there. It was a failing school which had been given 6 months to turn itself around. It was a much more serious incident or school or issue. That issue remained off the radar.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a counsellor...
the question is, just to follow on, are Muslim schools... is there a witch hunt against Muslim schools? Or heavily Muslim populated schools?
There's not a witch hunt. I mean, I think there's some practices that have gone on with Ofsted which perhaps we can criticise. I think one of the Blackburn schools was also suddenly inspected.
Yeah.
Yes.
The fear amongst Muslims...
The fear. I think that's a fear factor. It's whatever we do, is this adequate? Is this enough? Are they going to be happy with this, or are we going to be picked up on some point? And I think that is a culture, that is a mindset that needs to change. I mean, when I was a counsellor, I was no fan of Ofsted. Yeah. So I mean,
how much? But the thing, how much of it was to do with Michael Gove's stance on this, and the part he played? I
don't know. I mean, I'm not sure. I can't say that it's him driving it or he's not driving it. I think, like you said, there was a culture that's developed of an inspection of Islamic school looking for radicalisation or something that's not quite secular. I think that's the mindset that had developed.
And the concern is it's the Tories again.
Yeah, but the thing about it, Imtiaz, isn't that the government stereotyping Muslims again?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, you just said it yourself.
No, but that doesn't mean it's a government policy, is it?
No, but you just said it was government driven, though.
Well.
The whole Trojan horse thing was government driven, and it was based on a letter that was sent to. Hold on a second. It was based on a letter that was sent to the Daily Mail, which was then found to be fake.
Well, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So the thing about it is, don't you think people should have asked the question? Don't you think the politicians should have asked the question, is this letter authentic? Got that answer before they started jumping down people's throats in Birmingham schools.
Well, what happened was that after that letter, the inspection took place.
Yeah.
Which, if you had been in power, you'd have done exactly the same. What's going on in this school? Let's check it out. There's nothing wrong with the
Not necessarily. Well, I'm sorry, I disagree. If I was in power...
No, look, if you were in power, you have a duty to children, and you will know under the Children's Act there are a lot of statutory duties. So here we have to find out what's going on. The reaction afterwards is what we're concerned about. Any school, and anybody will know, can be inspected at any given time, and I think that is a good thing, because that's... We are talking...
Hold on a second.
And I totally agree with you about inspections. I think that schools should be prepared.
You see, the inspection, it's not the inspection, sorry.
It's the concern is about, are Muslim schools being picked on, or schools with Muslim pupils being picked on?
Just to change on that slightly. If I was in power and there was something that was said about a school that was getting radicalized, let's not say Muslim, let's say anything, then yes, you would have or something not good happening in a school. It could be anything. It could be pedophilia. It could be anything. Okay? Then yes, of course, you do something to make sure that you're investigating and you're stopping that. But don't you think at the same time you need to have a look at where the information's come from, what's happening there as well? We're not talking about a government who only has one hand to stretch out. It has at its the resources to investigate here and to investigate here. It took months before the letter was finally said to be fake. Should it have taken that long?
Well, I don't know what the select system was, how that letter got to government, and what they did with it. I don't know the actual internal, what the workings were. But what I'm saying is, if a concern is raised, regardless of where that concern comes from, I think there is a duty to investigate. And that's what I'm saying. Whether the investigation was correctly done, could it have been done in a better way? Could it have been done in a different way? That's a separate issue to the fact that there is a concern that needs to be looked at. So, as a result of the Trojan Horse School in Birmingham, a number of schools across the country where suddenly some parents said, well, we're a bit concerned, and that's why you had a whole sort of, I'm not going to say an avalanche, but a very significant number of Ofsted inspections that took place. And to be honest with you, with the exception of, like Ayub said, a few minor things, like they said, the vast majority of them got a clean bill of health. and they did get through. So there was.
No.
There were some concerns. I'm not saying there weren't some concerns, but
I think the way these inspections were carried out were very, very poor.
The concerns that Ofsted
yeah.
found. Hold on a second. The concerns that Ofsted found in the Tower Hamlets schools were not about radicalisation, but suddenly schools that were deemed to be outstanding just a couple of years earlier were suddenly really down. And there's concerns here, and there's concerns here, and there's concerns there. They were nothing to do with radicalisation. But the
your point is this: that was what you're saying is that was political. That wasn't. That was an independent.
Yes.
That's what
but
I'm saying.
Whilst we're on your point which you've made, because a concern's been raised, you investigate the concern. Yes, I agree with that. But because a concern's been made, shouldn't where the concern has come from, shouldn't that be investigated as well? I mean, we're talking about a bill likely to be legislation within a week or even less. If someone turns around and says, "Oh, I've got suspicion on that fella," that's it.
Well,
imagine if the counter-terrorism and security bill was in place now, and these inspectors went into these schools and found these answers. I
think when you're dealing with children, you have to err on the side of caution. And I don't make any apologies for the fact that the school was inspected. I was a counsellor. We had training in terms of how you. Under the Children's Act and how you dealt with any concern you have for children, you always err on the side of caution. I accept some of the inspections that were carried out were not the best inspections, and that some of the things that were said were not, like you said, the small things that were being blown out of all proportion. But there's no harm in inspection being carried out, and every school should be prepared for an inspection to be carried out. As far as whether is this a political. Is this a policy to target the Muslims? I don't agree with that.
But don't you think the government and certain ministers played a hand in this?
Well, it's conjecture, isn't it? You need to have, if you're making an accusation, you need to have proof. I mean, we can suspect, did this do this? It's slightly...
Somebody must have sent these inspectors into these schools.
Once a concern is raised, the inspectors are going to go in. As far as what happened, I really don't know the actual background to it, and in terms of which way, who said what. I mean,
somebody asked these inspectors, it's not appropriate to ask a young child about Sharia law.
Absolutely.
And then basing your judgment on that response.
Child.
To be honest, I don't know about that question. If that question was asked, it is not right.
It's been widely reported and confirmed that it has been asked.
But that's an inspector's problem, isn't it? He shouldn't be asking.
But who's advising the instructor?
Well, it's an independent body.
Inspector.
Ofsted is independent.
Ofsted is independent, but this is where the complaint has come in about Ofsted. Ofsted has started turning political. And are following political agendas.
Well, you're concluding that.
No, I'm not concluding that.
Where's your evidence to say that?
Well, there are plenty of people. There's plenty of people who have actually concluded to that. Not me.
Look, when you make statements like that, you have to support it with evidence. If you're saying that Ofsted is now a political, let me finish. If you're saying that an inspector is now become a political pawn in the hands of a politician, you're making two very serious allegations. You're saying that the independence of that inspector is compromised. Secondly, you're saying that a politician is interfering in an area which he shouldn't be interfering in. Those are very serious accusations. If you're going to make those accusations, you really have to provide proof. Otherwise, you need to... Those are baseless accusations.
Okay, so why is an inspector going into a school and asking an 8-year-old the question that you mentioned?
Well, I know. Why is he doing that? What did somebody ask?
So let me ask you a question. Let me change.
Did somebody ask that inspector?
Let me ask a question. Did you ask that question? Have you raised it with your party?
It's the first time I've heard of it. I've not heard that. I've not heard of that before.
Okay, just the listener who sent in. My apologies. I've been meaning to read this for a while. About the 10%. The Conservatives will cut funding, the school funding by 10%. He sent along the Guardian article link, which the first paragraph says. Now, this is the Guardian. First paragraph says English schools face a budget cut of an estimated 10% in real terms during the next Parliament if the Conservatives win the election after David Cameron conceded that his party could not promise to inflation-proof education funding. So yes, they've gone to a calculation. It's not the Conservatives who have said there is 10%. That is all.
It's the Guardian. Come on.
What's wrong with the Guardian?
The Guardian's
Better than the Mail.
What I'm saying is the Guardian's not exactly pro-conservative, is it? It's a Labour supporting paper. I mean,
yes, but
you take the
wait, hold on a second. You just said a minute ago about me and Ofsted.
You take the Guardian's calculations and they're concluding just because Cameron hasn't said something, this is what he meant. I mean, that's just, you've got to wait for the manifesto to come out and the commitment. I mean, that's just that, if you're going to take that as proof, then really we're going to be clutching at a lot of straws.
Okay, but it is a Guardian article, and a Guardian is quite respected.
With respect.
To be fair, the Guardian is quite respected. I would not expect the Guardian to say something that didn't have some
what I'm saying is
it.
the Guardian has done their calculation based on something Cameron said. They're concluding, Cameron said this, therefore he must mean X, and that's the calculation according to that. That's not Conservative Party policy, is it? That's what the Guardian is conjecturing, that this is what we think will happen. Yep. Wait for the manifesto. Let's see what the policy stays.
Okay, let's wait for the manifesto, and we will call you back after the manifesto comes out as well, inshallah. Now that we're going a little bit over time, we've gone over an hour over time. But I do want to get this one question in, inshallah. I know we've done. Have we done education? Anything else?
I think we're winding up now.
Immigration. I've got to ask this question to you. You're a solicitor. You've been in the field of immigration, if I'm right. I know I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I can't remember if you did.
I've done a bit of immigration, yes.
£18,600 earning. You've got the English test, life in the UK. None of this is relevant to be. All of this is making it difficult for someone to come over. The 18,600 is across the country. How can that be? We know the cost of living up north is, or rather, the earnings up north are less than down south. Now, how can the immigration policy have one figure for everybody? Have you opposed that?
In terms of the 18,600, we feel that the correct figure should have been the minimum wage. I think it comes out to around 14,000. Initially, it was 26.5 that was proposed. It came down to 18.5. Even more so now, because we've taken people out of the income tax bracket from 6,000 starting threshold to 10,500. So they've got more disposable income. So that is being. I'm not exactly sure where we are in court, because the government was defeated at the first hearing. It won at the second hearing. So I'm not quite sure where we are at the moment. I've not checked in the last few months where we are as far as the court case is concerned. But
would you challenge it?
Yeah, I think the minimum wage is a common sense one.
Okay. The other thing is about the life in the UK test. A lot of those questions, people who've been born and raised in the UK can't answer.
I was going to say that perhaps you and I would struggle with a few of the questions.
We would.
It's there at the moment, and if it's there and people are going to pass, I'm not too sort of stressed about that, because it's not something that's. People are coming to the UK. I think they need to learn a little bit about the country they're going to. We still have,
See,
I shouldn't be saying this, but some of my mum's friends, and I think they've been living in the country for 40 years, don't speak any English. I mean, it's just it's difficult for them to it is changing. I mean, my wife's an immigrant. I mean, she came from India. I married in India. At that time, these tests weren't there, but now for the nationality, you do have to have these tests. And I support it to the point, because it helps the person coming to the country more than anything else. I know you feel that perhaps it's a restriction, it's a burden on that person coming, but that 2 months, 3 months of difficult studying holds them in good stead when they do come here.
Well, no, I mean, the life in the UK test, if it was relevant to the life in the UK, then that's one thing. But to be honest with you, a lot of it is about things that none of us know about, to be honest with you.
I think it improves the English.
Right. But the English test, I want to touch on that, because, of course, one of the areas of immigration is an elderly person who's a widower, for example, looking for someone for companionship more than anything else. Now, for him to find someone, see, he's 60, 65. He wants to find someone who's about 50 or 55. That person in India will probably never have wanted to learn English, given up on the whole issue of ever coming to England, and now for the two to be married and for her to come over, she has to learn English at that age. I mean, surely there needs to be some area in immigration where an individual's needs are actually taken into consideration.
I mean, the example you're given is probably it's going to be a very, very small number that actually affects. But I take the point that a woman of 60 would now struggle to do the test, or would she want to do the test? And when you have a blanket policy for somebody who's 20 and somebody who's 60, you will have the odd anomaly like what you just mentioned. So I mean, what can we do about it? We can raise it with the powers that be. Once I get elected, I say, look, we need to take consideration into people who are of a certain age, whether there's any exemptions or whether there's anything else that they can do, which helps. Because, as you say, when somebody who's 60 plus coming to the country on a marriage basis, is not going to need the same skills as somebody who's 20, 22, who's coming over to the UK.
Okay. Yep. And I've got one last question. Are you
okay, my last question. As a voter, the people will be thinking, or as voters, people will be thinking, the experience that they've had with current Tory MPs in neighbouring towns, for example. They'll be thinking, can we really trust another Tory councillor in Batley?
You mean Tory MP?
Tory MP, sorry. Yeah.
Are you referring to any specific? Which MP are you referring to? Because if we without naming any names, there are some. Jason McCartney, who's in Cornwall, is an excellent MP. He does a lot of work and he's very active. I mean, he's spoken out on the Palestine issue as well, and he's an excellent MP.
Yeah.
So. If we're going to take him as an example, you'll have a very good Tory MP if I win.
Okay, good.
Right. Okay. Okay. Mine's a bit more broader. It's the question is: it's a twofold question. First of all, do you think that the coalition has worked over the last 4 years? And secondly, because it does look like this election could well be a hung election as well. If the Conservatives were to go into a coalition, would it be the Lib Dems again?
Taking your last question first, I mean, I think Lib Dems won't have many MPs left after the next election. So, I mean, as you say, it's very open, very unpredictable. At the moment, what the polls are suggesting is some sort of a hung parliament. We, however, are optimistic we can probably pull ahead in the polls in the next couple of months. Obviously, we're going for a majority. That's the ideal form of government. If not, we'll have to see who the largest party is and what the deals are. I mean, that's something not really for me at this stage to I can't give you a definitive answer. I mean, all I can say is that I'll do my best to win here, and if I win, I'll represent the people here as best as I can, whether it's a coalition, whether it's a majority government. I think that we can probably leave it at that.
Okay.
Well, I think final word really. Thanks very much, Imtiaz. Yep. I found you very open, very frank, and very honest.
Yeah,
and that's really, in my view, are good qualities for an MP.
Thanks.
I have to agree with you, but I mean, it's always enjoyable to actually have discuss a point with someone who doesn't necessarily agree with on every note. It has been a pleasure, to be honest with you. Thank you very much, Jazakallah, for coming into the studio and for coming on to Radio IMWS Election Special and the extra hour.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm going to be sleeping on the sofa tonight.
You might not be the only one.
Well, we do hope
we're well over time, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Don't worry about that. We're all going to. I think we're all going to be. Jazakallah again for coming.
All I would say to the listeners, I mean, look, there are so many issues that we've discussed today, and look, the three of us here, we've disagreed on many points. The main thing is to engage in these discussions, to have these discussions, to listen to different viewpoints, and to engage in the political process. One of the concerns that I have as a Muslim is that not enough Muslims are engaged in the electoral process. We have our concerns. We know, we debate, we discuss. We don't engage in the political process. You can join Labour, you can join Conservatives, you can join Liberals, join a political party, get involved, because the only way you're going to change, whether it's international, you have concerns about international events, whether you have concerns local events, the only way you're going to change these is if you're getting involved with political parties. You can discuss till the cows come home in your front room. You're not going to have any change come through. I mean, look, I am here. I want to win. I'm stood here. It's not easy. You give me a grilling. But you have to engage in that. It's part of the process. And it's by listening to different views that you hopefully come to the right decision. And that's all I would say, is that get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing that I do definitely agree with you on. No, that alhamdulillah, few points. Okay, Jazakallah for coming in, and we do hope to see you closer to the election. Hopefully we can arrange another show closer to the elections as well, inshallah ta'ala. But just in case, best of luck, inshallah, for the elections. Hope it goes well for you, inshallah. We will be listeners out there, we will be continuing with the election special next Friday, 8 p.m. Hopefully we go out for the same amount of time. I've enjoyed it today, I have to say.
I have as well. Thank you very much.
And that is because of Imtiaz, I have to say. Have you got a confirmation for next week?
Well, we're working on that. Hopefully we will have a by early next week.
Yeah. And just for the listeners out there to know, we are focusing on both the local seats, the Batley Spen seat and the Dewsbury seat. And we have asked Joe Cox. I believe Joe Cox is confirmed, inshallah ta'ala. We have asked Paula Sheriff. We have contacted, or we are in the process of contacting Simon Reevell as well. And if the Lib Dems decide to put someone up in these seats, then hopefully we'll try and bring them on as well, inshallah. So we'll deal with the three main parties. That's it for us for this evening. Jazakallah for listening. We will be back live on the air on Sunday, inshallah, from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. with Kids On. It sounds like such a different show, that does, doesn't it? Oh, goodness me. Yes, I will be back in the chair on Sunday for Kids On, inshallah, 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. Make sure, inshallah, that you're all listening, and make sure all the children, wonderful children, have been joining us over the last month or so. Make sure they come and come and join us as well. And then the shows will begin again from next Tuesday, 8 p.m. inshallah, with the Islamic program. Wednesday with the Gujarati at 8 p.m. and on Thursday the current affairs we at 8 p.m. Followed by Fridays. Guess what? At 8 p.m. the election special part 2, inshallah.
Right. Look forward to that.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it, definitely. Okay, that's it from us. You can continue listening to Radio IMWS very easily by going to the website www.imws.org.uk, or you can download the app, make it life easier for you. Remember, we are live. We are 24/7 with nasheeds and qirats. So inshallah ta'ala, do go along to the website and keep listening. The receivers will be switched off, but they will be switched on again tomorrow sometime, inshallah. So 24/7 online. That's it from us, from gentlemen in the studio. Jazakallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh from me too.